20. Right on time, Mr. Drummond has arrived. So if we will stand now, we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we get started with any possible public comment this morning, I would like to welcome our two newest board members, or commission members, Miss Kathy Diotis to my right, and Mr. Arthur Ebersberger. So, welcome. If you'd like to.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
This time I will entertain any public comment.
So far, the people that have joined us today all have a comment for things in the public hearing for special, or for all the separate occasions. But there is someone in our Zoom that hasn't turned on their mic or allowed us to vet them. So, Kirsten, if you could please accept our breakout rooms invite, we'll find out if you want to make public comment. That's all I have.
Thank you. Hearing no public comment, we will move on to the meeting minute review from June 11th, 2020.
Is Sharon on?
Sharon's on.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to accept the minutes.
Mute Mike.
Second.
Motion and second. Any comment, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye, aye, aye. All right, thank you very much. There are no extension requests this morning. Next up, we will invite Mr. Wisnowski, as he will provide us with some legislation and legal matter updates.
I'll be very brief, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Welcome, Kathy. Welcome, Arthur. I'm the director of planning.
Get up with the microphone. Can't hear you.
Sorry. Thanks, Mike. Okay, welcome, Kathy.
Thank you.
Welcome, Arthur.
Thank you.
Director of Planning and Zoning. Other than the piece of legislation that we have on the agenda this morning, I have nothing further to add, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if Mr. Drummond perhaps has any items. You know, the summer's kind of slow when it comes to legislation. I have nothing to add.
Thank you very much. So, next on our agenda is public hearings for a concept plan, SP 19-10-0044 for Goldsboro Materials LLC.
Mr. Chairman, the following notice of public hearing appeared in the Record Observer and Bay Times on July 31st and August 7th, 2020. The notice of public hearing is as follows. The Planning Commission for Queen Anne's County hereby gives notice pursuant to Title 18, 195E2, that it will hold a public hearing concerning a conditional use application for a newly proposed 60-acre sand and gravel major extraction operation located on the west side of Maryland Route 313, north of the intersection with L Downs Road in Ingleside. The property is on tax map 31, parcel 40. The application was submitted by the petitioner, Goldsboro Materials LLC, care of Francis E. Gardner. The petitioner's proposal is made under the procedures of Article 18.1, Article 17 of the County Code. The application will be considered by the Planning Commission at a public hearing on Thursday, August 13th, 2020 at 9 a.m. It's 8:50 a.m. at the moment in the conference room of the Department of Planning and Zoning on Vincent Street in Centerville. Viewing of this meeting is available via Facebook. It gives the website that you can log in, and also a YouTube website where interested citizens can log in and view the public hearing. Individuals wishing to provide public comment can do so via a live Zoom meeting accessible to the public, and then a link is provided. Planning Commission will receive testimony for or against the application. Following the public hearing, the Planning Commission will make recommendations regarding the petitioner's proposal to Queen Anne's County Board of Appeals. This is an open meeting, but, excuse me, upon compliance with the Open Meetings Act, a part or all of the meeting may be conducted in closed session. Notice of the meeting and any closed session related thereto will be posted in the lobby of the Department of Planning and Zoning here in Centerville. The notice of public hearing concludes by indicating that copies of the petition are available for review at the Department of Planning and Zoning during regular business hours. And there is explanation as how to contact the department to review the application in the office. So I'm satisfied, Mr. Chairman, that the procedural and notice prerequisites to the convening of this public hearing have been satisfied. Moreover, I need to recuse myself from any involvement in this application as I represent the property owner, Albert Downs Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Drummond. Prior to your,
Better if we wait a couple minutes, so,
okay,
because it may be that people are logging in and are waiting closer to 9 o'clock.
understood. Thank you.
Do you have any questions that we can't ask him? Who do we ask?
Ms. Brinster. Sharon.
Okay. So when we read the recommendation, do we do all the?
So, we are going to take a slight break for 7 minutes until 9 o'clock, and then we'll resume at that time. Thank you. It is now 9 a.m. on August 13th, 2020. I will call the Planning Commission meeting back to order. And
Mr. Chairman, as I indicated after reading the notice of public hearing, I'm obliged to recuse myself because of the conflict of interest as I represent the property owner. And Pat Thompson, who's the county attorney, is here to assist the Planning Commission.
outstanding. Thank you, sir. So we will now hear from the Goldsboro Materials LLC in reference to file number SP 19-10-0044.
All right, the developer for this project is Goldsboro Materials LLC. Engineer would be Lane Engineering, care of Sean Callahan. The property is located at tax map 31, parcel 40, on the west side of Route 313, just south of Ingleside. The entire parcel is approximately 220.521 acres. And the area proposed for the actual mining permit is approximately 60 acres, with the proposed mining pit area to be 30.5 acres. The applicant's request is to create a new 60-acre major extraction, and they're here today before you looking for concept plan approval and a favorable recommendation to the Board of Appeals. Here you can see just a general vicinity map of the location site. As I stated before, it's on 313, just south of Ingleside. Here's the overall parcel highlighted here. As I stated before, it's approximately 220 acres, with the east side of the property being approximately 125 acres, and the west side being 94.534 acres. The west side is the portion that we're talking about as part of this application. The east side is not proposed to be mined at this time. Here you can see the predominant lands around this property, and this property itself are zoned AG. There's some VC up north of that, you see, which is in the blue. That's actually the village of Ingleside, and you can see the Bridgetown mine property just to the west of this location as well. Getting into the site statistics for the project, as I stated before, the proposed mining excavation area is 30.5 acres. The actual site permit application would be for 60 acres, which would include the stockpile areas, the cleaning areas, loading areas, and the berming around the actual project itself. The applicants estimated that at 100 loads per day, this operation would be mined out fully in 3 to 3.5 years. However, that all is dependent on demand from the site. And the extent of the area to be disturbed based on all improvements would be approximately 65 acres, with the final depths of the excavation pit being around 50 feet. Some environmental and historical features in the site, as you can see to the west, which is technically the top of the screen in this orientation of the view, there is a perennial stream, which is actually a tax ditch that runs parallel along this property here, with its 100-foot buffer shown there in blue. To the very north of the property, or to the right of the screen, you can see the limits of a pocket of non-tidal wetlands on the property, shown outside of the limits of disturbance. And within your reports, you also received a historic review of the property. There are a few limits of archaeological reserve areas that the applicants indicated here on the plans. Those are highlighted in red for you. As you can see here, those limits of the archaeological areas that were found on the site are located within the limits of disturbance for the proposed operation. The archaeological review stated that they'd like to do a phase 2 review of this site. However, the applicant's coming before you looking for a concept plan and a recommendation to the Board of Appeals, because they would like to gain approvals before moving forward through that process of further investigation to the site. Here are the proposed berm plantings for the project. As you can see highlighted in green, along the front entrance of the property across 313, the applicant's proposing a 4 to 8 foot undulating berm, which would be planted with a 45-foot width buffer. I'll show those profiles here in a second. And the remaining perimeter berming would be 3 to 6 feet undulating berms as well, and those are highlighted in orange surrounding the remaining portion. Here you can see just an example of the berm planting detail for those front 4 to 8 foot undulating berms. You can see the cross section is approximately 45 feet wide, and the applicants also provided a cut sheet detail to show you what those plantings would be proposed to look like from vehicular view on 313 as well. This is just the overall site operations details outside of the mining and excavation area. Here we have the proposed stockpile areas along with the plant site, and then the office facility and scale house with the proposed parking for the employees at the facility. The scale house also includes a washing station area on the exit of the property. And you can see there's also a proposed utility gate and signage at the entrance of the property as well. The proposed haul route for this facility, since it is located on a state highway, the applicants proposed that 80% of the trucks leaving and coming to the site would go northbound on 313 onto MD19 and then on further to US 301, with the remaining 20% going southbound on 313 and then on to MD 312, which would be on into Caroline County. And that's all except for local deliveries that would have the opportunity or ability to use local roads if need be. You did get a copy of the Vipretech noise study. I believe it was done on July 10th for this project. Noted in that application, there's some areas of spillover that would be in excess of the 55 dB limitations. Those areas in excess would actually be at the entrance of the property where trucks would be coming to and from the site, which are typical with these operations, as you can't really screen an area where vehicles will enter and exit. But the remaining portions of the property would be compliant with all of the noise standards in Maryland law. And here's the end-use plan for the proposed project. As typical as we see with a lot of these excavation projects, there'd be a remaining pond with stabilized berms. To the left side of your screen, south side of the property, you can see there's an existing irrigation pivot already there that's proposed to remain. That property or portion of the property is proposed to remain in agricultural lands with the proposed home site and pasture area to the right of your screen north of the property, with the berms and plantings proposed to remain in place as well. And if you have any additional questions for me, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to the applicant now.
Are there any questions at this time for Mr. Tarleton? Hearing none, will applicant please come up?
Chairman, you want to sit at the table?
Yep, sit separated. Please identify yourself and where you're from for the record, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mark Gabler, Gabler. I'm an attorney with Rich & Henderson in Annapolis, representing the applicant.
My name is Francis Gardner. I'm a principal with Goldsboro Materials.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Okay, if I leave this off?
Please.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we've provided a fair amount of detail, both in the plans and our consultant reports to the Planning Commission for consideration. I certainly don't intend to go through all of that in detail or repeat all of it. A couple of points with respect to the staff report that I'd like to clarify. The first is there was a question about the operating hours, and there was a discrepancy between the morning truck start time weekdays versus Saturdays. That is a typo. Our plan is not to start at 6 a.m. with trucking on Saturday, but rather 6:30 like all the other days. The rest of the hours were accurate, so if I can make that correction for you on the record, I would appreciate it.
Noted.
Thank you. The second issue that I'd like to just discuss briefly is the archaeological reserve areas. As Mr. Tarleton indicated, there are a few areas that have been identified on the property as reserve areas for further study. The applicant is committed to proceeding with the Phase 2, which is a fairly expensive process. What I'd like to say is that is the requirement as part of the state permitting process as well, They would be required to identify those areas and would not be able to get their mining permits from the state until after resolving those comments that MHT provided. So they would have to complete that process, whether you made that a condition of your recommendation or not. But the applicant's comfortable with that being made a condition, and they are committed to doing it, but they would like to at least get on the road to getting this thing approved and then proceed with the Phase 2 thereafter. We've brought several people with us today to be available to answer questions or address any concerns that the Planning Commission may have. I would like to present some limited testimony from one of the principals to just provide some additional detail on the operations. And with me to my right is Francis E. Gardner, otherwise known as Skip Gardner, who is one of the principals. I'd like to ask him a few questions and let him explain a few details for you, if I may. Mr. Gardner, you're a principal of Goldsboro Materials?
That's correct.
And can you just briefly, for the Planning Commission's knowledge, describe your experience within this aggregate industry?
Certainly, I've been involved in the aggregate industry for over 30 years and have done mining projects in various counties throughout the state, and currently involved in 2 active counties of Caroline and Rundle. And we also operate some transportation companies that haul the actual material, one on the eastern shore here and then one on the western shore. So one of the primary things I like to bring up is we control the trucking of the material, which is, always a concern of folks on operations of this sort. And so we have the GPS in the trucks, and so the majority of the trucks coming in and out of our facilities are controlled by us.
Those are trucks you use through another company that you're involved with?
That's correct.
Okay. And you've heard the reference to 100 loads a day trucks, and
Yes,
you
sir.
intend to stick to that limitation?
Yes.
And in terms of the routes, the haul routes that have been discussed, both going north and south, you have the GPS in the trucks, as you just mentioned, to ensure that the trucks
That is
follow
correct.
those roads? Okay. And will you also add signage to the exit in order to
Yes,
further remind
there'll
the
be
truck drivers?
signage at the site, and also there'll be notices given to customers that have their own trucks that come in for the, what we call the kind of grocery store business, letting them know, what the approved routes are in and out of the facility.
Just elaborate on the GPS system, so you'll be able to monitor.
We've had that for years. We've had that, it just monitors where the trucks are. You can monitor speeds. You can say how long they were in the facilities, where they're stopping. You can pretty much keep total contact with what the trucks are doing.
In terms of the number of employees that you expect to employ at this facility?
We anticipate 7 to 10 employees.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Did the commission have any additional questions for Mr. Gardner?
Just a clarification, Counselor, is you mentioned roughly 100 loads per day. You used the word limit. I was understanding, if we're reading staff report, that was an estimate. Are you proposing that we limit you to 100 trucks per day, or is that
No.
simply in?
No. Thank you. That's an important clarification. We're not, but that is the estimate that they intend to pursue.
Okay.
I have as well Mr. Callahan from Lane Engineering standing by on the Zoom conference, as well as several other consultants. I'll defer to the Planning Commission if you'd like to hear. If you have questions for Mr. Callahan, I'm happy to provide him and make him available for questions, but he's prepared to testify with respect to any questions raised about the plans that were submitted. If the Planning Commission doesn't feel that's necessary, then we'll move on.
I have a question before we move on to Lane Engineering.
Okay.
So all your routes will be purely on state roads? They will not be accessing any county roads that you're intending plan? Okay. I did note, I saw that staff had mentioned you have to obtain the state highway.
Yes, we have to do a state highway access permit and go through that design process with the XL decel lanes, and the entranceway. We've done some preliminary work at the site as far as the cores and some preliminary design to get to this point to understand where the location of the entrance was going to be. And we've had some discussion with State Highway, but nothing's been going to final design yet.
Have you been in contact with the neighboring properties and?
Sure. We've spoken to, the gentleman who owns this property, he owns both sides of the road, and I had a conversation, Cheney Enterprise owns the parcel directly behind us on the other side of the tax ditch. And there's the farm to the, I guess it would be to the north. One of our other principals in this operation has spoken with the farmer to the north, the Higgs folks. So the answer is yes.
Another question I have in reference to the historical and the multi-component prehistoric sites. Can you pull that slide back so we could identify the areas? I can't see that. So you didn't, those areas are not specifically identified here on this slide. The 18QU 1061 and 1063, 1062, those are all recommended for phase 2. Are those these 3 sites here?
3 shown in red, yes, Mr. Chairman.
They're okay.
And the 2 to the is that south, I believe, to the left of the one is shown in the proposed extraction area, and the other is shown mostly outside of, but also inside the berm area. Those are the 2 that really have to be addressed in order to begin the mining. So the phase 2 has been recommended. They'll proceed with that, but again, it's a time-consuming and expensive process.
Right. So I did note that the historic recommendations were try and preserve what may be found in that area.
The recommendation, as I understand it, is that proceed with a more intensive study. They call it a phase 2 study, which is a further effort to define and clarify the boundaries and the scope and extent of what's there. I was informed by the representative of MHT, I believe her first name is Dixie, that MHT believes that upon completion of the phase 2 that those sites will not meet the qualifications for the National Register list, but they won't know that until it's completed. And again, that's information that would have to be provided to the state during the state mining permit application. The MHT comments with respect to those areas would have to be addressed, or no mining permit's going to be issued.
If we were in a perfect world, when do you think that you would have your first load?
Yesterday, in a perfect world.
No, I know, well, that's your wish, but
That's our perfect world.
with the studies that have to be done and everything, what time frame are you looking at?
Don't hold me to this, but I would anticipate if we were fortunate enough to get approval at the county levels, we would proceed on with our archaeological process.
How long are they expected?
Well, we've got
to
a
take?
team that has to be teamed up with the farmer's crops. So we would have to catch it after he got his crops off the field, do the archaeological, the additional survey, the dig, the grid of the areas. I would anticipate probably it would take 60 days to 90 days to get that report done by the consultant. It's submitted at that point in time, my understanding is to the MHT folks. Then there's a certain time frame I think they have to review that. So I could imagine the archaeological process to take 4 to 6 months. And then in the event that it's not eligible for the historic register, then that's one path. And then I don't know the next step. If it is, if the items they find have to be cataloged for the historic register, I don't know the timeline on that. But we would we would anticipate Next
Close to a year.
next spring
Yeah.
would probably be my
The
best guess.
earliest, right, okay. Thank you.
Chairman, did you have additional questions? I didn't want to go on without you completing.
No, I'm good for now, thank you.
Just briefly, Mr. Gardner, you mentioned the entrance. Is there going to be more than one entrance to the site?
No, all the trucks come off the state highway off of 313.
Can you just speak briefly about methods to control dust on the site and dirt getting out on the state highway?
Sure. We keep a water truck on site for dust, and then we also have and that also takes care of the entrance road coming in. We typically extend our entrance roads in with asphalt paving to eliminate any tracking out on the state highway.
That's all I have for Mr. Gardner.
Are there any additional questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, I have, not for the applicant specifically, but probably more for Department of Public Works, and I see Mr. Mon in the back. I don't know if he's prepared to speak to this, but with respect to the comment in the staff report about stormwater design.
Please, Mr. Mon?
They're getting Matt.
Oh, Matt's here? Okay.
Morning, everyone.
Morning, if you could please identify yourself and where you're from.
My name is Matt Lucas. I'm an engineer with the Department of Public Works.
Morning, Mr. Lucas. Question about the comment on the staff notes. It says stormwater. This is with respect to some rare, threatened, and endangered species that are known to inhabit the area. It says stormwater design should be carefully evaluated to ensure the proposed development does not result in negative impacts to these species, specifically referencing suspended sediments as these mussels and other animals in nearby receiving waters are filter feeders. Is the department satisfied that there's adequate stormwater facilities in place, or at least designed at this stage?
At the concept level, yes. With these mines, the drainage area is kind of self-contained within themselves. They do propose 2 flat-bottom swales that will drain into the pit. So at this point, in the concept level, yes, I am satisfied that the stormwater will be
And it obviously
handled.
will undergo more in-depth evaluation as we process and go through the application.
Yes, I have
Okay.
asked as a condition that more detailed stormwater plans are developed as they proceed.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of the applicant or of county staff? Thank you, gentlemen. This time we'll open up the floor to public comment. All public comment shall be limited to 3 minutes.
We do have a couple people waiting in the room that were part of the team of presenters. I'm not sure if they want to make comment. We have Sean, Mike, and John. Do you guys want to say anything? Just raise your hand. I'll go over to Zoom. Nothing? How about you, Sean? Good? All right. Looks like we have no public comment for this section.
Thank you, Bruce. So I will confirm no public comment, and we will now close public comment. This time, I will open up the floor for a motion for a concept plan favorable recommendation.
So moved.
Okay, so I have Mr. Ebersberger making a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Baker. Is there any discussion at this time? Okay, so this time I'll entertain, what we'll do is we will do this in two phases. We'll take a vote on the concept plan.
Sharon has something to say.
Oh, Sharon?
And yeah,
Yes.
1 second, we're going to mute our room.
Good morning. I just wanted to verify what the motion actually is. Perhaps more specific details as we usually do.
So, Mr.
Hold
Ebersberger.
on 1 second.
Yeah.
Waiting on Mike. There we go.
So, Mr. Ebersberger, when you accept the motion,
Right.
or you make the motion, you would, in the staff report, say for the concept plan, and read, let it be resolved that the Planning Commission regarding the request by the Goldsboro Materials LLC for the creation of a 60-acre major sand and gravel mining operation near Ingleside is more appropriately described in the Department of Planning and Zoning file SP 1910-0044, hereby finds, and if you'd like to make some of the findings here, you can list those. And then make the motion to grant a concept plan
You read that
approval.
from where? You just read that from,
Last
So,
page.
from the last page in your staff report.
and my apologies for not knowing where that staff.
No. So, the report that they were reading from, it's a 3-page document, front and back.
Gotcha. Oh, sure.
So if you read the concept plan and then let it be resolved,
Okay,
and hereby grants, because I believe you're making a favorable recommendation,
right.
and then we can get the second from Ms. Dobson,
Sure enough.
and then we'll discuss and/or vote.
Okay, so my motion then becomes, concept plan resolved that the Planning Commission regarding the request by Goldsboro Materials LLC for the creation of a 60-acre major sand and gravel mining operation near Ingleside, and as more particularly described in the Department of Planning and Zoning file SP-19-10-0044, hereby finds and grants concept plan approval, recommending to the Board of Appeals resolve.
No.
No?
We'll stop there, because we
Okay.
have to do two phases.
Okay.
First, we have to accept the concept plan,
Gotcha.
and then we're gonna make a recommendation to the Board of Appeals.
That's my motion.
So there's your motion, we have the motion. Do I-
Second.
And I have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Concept plan is approved unanimously, Sharon. So now we have a recommendation to the Board of Appeals on the table. And the recommendation goes to the Board of Appeals, for those that don't know, which is a secondary board, because this is a conditional use in the agricultural zone. So because it's a conditional use, the Board of Appeals has to approve it. At which point in time, we as Planning Commission members can impose reasonable conditions upon that property as a recommendation to the Board of Appeals. The Board of Appeals will take our recommendations and make a determination as to whether or not they want to implement them or not. Historically, they take most of our recommendations and adhere and hold to those. Before they can even get through the next phase, they still have to have a Board of Appeals process and approval before they can continue. Then they'll bring everything back to us for a final site plan approval for the actual mining operations. So we will see this entire project again. I'm not sure after they go to the Board of Appeals if they have to go back after they get approvals from all the other agencies. So, all right, at this time, I will entertain a recommendation to the Board of Appeals.
I'd like to make the recommendation.
Okay.
Need a second, right? Need a second.
You got to read it first.
Make a
Oh,
motion
okay,
first.
all right. Resolved that the Planning Commission regarding the request by Goldsboro Materials LLC for the creation of a 60-acre major sand and gravel mining operation near Ingleside, and is more particularly described in Department of Planning and Zoning File SP 19-10-0044, hereby forwards a favorable recommendation to the Board of Appeals under sections 18.1, 14C, 7, and 18.1, 95E with the following conditions. A copy of the MDE mining permit is obtained and supplied as part of the application for site plan review. Fully engineered stormwater design and an updated stormwater report must be submitted as part of the site plan application. The Phase 2 archaeological study required by MHT is supplied as part of the application for site plan review. A landscaping maintenance and inspection agreement and a cash surety bond for all landscaping is provided with the site plan application. Haul trucks shall adhere to the approved haul route as discussed and presented. There shall be no truck parking on Goldsboro Road, Maryland Route 313, no stacking or parking outside of the gate, no jake brakes, no tailgate slamming either on site or on the public road. The applicant shall post a sign with a notice regarding these restrictions. Any legal documents are reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission attorney. Any changes to the end-use plan must return to the Planning Commission for a recommendation to the Board of Appeals for an amendment to the conditional use. Any and all financial sureties for reclamation, landscaping, stormwater management, and enforcement are in place before final permits are granted. All state permits are in place prior to final permitting by Queen Anne's County. Any outstanding documentation or comments stemming from agency reviews are addressed prior to the Board of Appeals hearing.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. Are there any other comments or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none.
I just get a confirmation on who the second was for Sharon.
It was Mr. Ebersberger.
Gentlemen and ladies out there.
Great job.
Should be good to disconnect.
All right, next next on our agenda is the text amendment, TACO 20-08 for, to clarify language, as in for the definition of agriculture specific to alcohol production facilities. Ms. Murdoch, welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. So you last saw this proposal in May, and it was on May 14th, and we received a lot of input and a lot of testimony. Overall, what you are seeing before you is unchanged. That review was pretty favorably received, with the exception of the 50% requirement for products to be produced on site, which was never the intention to hold. It was simply a starting point that was consistent with our existing code. What was requested as a result of that deliberation was a comparative analysis provided to you by staff of all of the jurisdictions in Maryland, which is why this application took a while to come back to you. We had done this analysis when we put the code together, but we did not pull it all into one document, and as you see, it's pretty extensive, and it illustrates the complexity in the regulations in all of the jurisdictions, because there really are no two jurisdictions that have done it in the same way. You also asked for the building code provisions, which have been provided to you, and copies of the Class 4, 5, and 8 liquor licenses. I gave you 1, 3, 4, 5, and 8. 1, 3, and 8 are referenced in the standing code and the proposed language. You also requested that Joe Stevens, on behalf of his client, James Falk, provide you with some additional information regarding the growing of hops and what is entailed and what is necessary to that production, and what is a reasonable expectation of a hops production on a property. And also, Mr. Stevens put forward an example from Talbot County. So, and that has all been provided to you. What I would just like to do is to summarize where we are and what you have before you. And that is, we're really still looking to amend our standing definition of agriculture by accommodating the agricultural enterprise agritourism provisions, by adding a specific definition of an alcohol production facility, and also adding a specific definition of distillery to accompany our standing definitions of a farm brewery and a winery. So what we've done is we have these 3 subcategories of alcohol production facility, and we're folding them into the standing definition of agriculture, adding this use to the agricultural district and the countryside district as a conditional use. What we have not done is added specific conditions for this use under a conditional use. We haven't added additional performance standards for this use. And the reason for that is that our definition specifies that each one of these uses is tied to an alcohol license. Those licenses are very specific in what is permitted along with that license. We felt that tying these uses to this other license provision, which is very prescriptive, was sufficient in allowing the county the flexibility to look at each application on its own merit based on our standing conditional use standards, which apply to all conditional uses and really look at the nature of the neighborhood impacts. There's a site plan component to it. So we felt that this was a way of streamlining this process, and as you looked at the chart and how other counties are doing it, you can see how complicated this process can get. And what we did in talking to Vivian Swinson, our zoning administrator, and our liquor board attorney and our planning attorney, was we're really just looking at supporting agritourism, making this use pretty straightforward in its application, but also site-specific, because what might be a great impact on one property might not be the case on another. So we wanted that flexibility. What this language also does is it clarifies that an alcohol production facility is not permitted in an area of open space, just so if that should come up, it's clear. So that's what you have before you. I'm happy to walk you through any of the documents that you received, if you'd like me to. What I did do, which I probably should have done for you, is I color-coded, and this wasn't easy, and I don't know if it really helps, but I did color-code the counties that define this use as strictly permitted and then permitted with additional conditions and approvals, that categorize as special exception and then not permitted at all. So some counties get very prescriptive in prohibiting the use. So I color-coded it with green for permitted, yellow for conditional use, and red for not permitted, and then the gray area is when there are extra provisions attached. And if I flip through the charts, you'll see, oh, you can't see it, can you? Oh, I didn't Did I connect it? Okay, I'm sorry, I've got to do that. Yeah, wait a minute. Okay, sorry about that. So I'm going to bring that chart up for you.
Maybe while that's happening, could maybe explain about the reliance on the liquor license that will be issued, and there's certain events and so on that the liquor license permits that would not be regulated through the land use article.
Correct. So the reason we did want to connect this use and create the conditional use category was there are, like I said, there are very prescriptive permitted activities that are defined within each license that you saw in those licenses. Breweries are very flexible. There are a lot of activities that are covered in terms of retail space, a tasting room, but also there are promotional events that are directly affiliated with the production of the product that are permitted. And there are parameters set on those promotional events that are specific to the production of the alcohol that are prescribed in each one of the licenses to different degrees.
The liquor licenses. The liquor licenses.
The liquor licenses to different degrees. And one distinction that has to be made is that would all be covered. Anything that is identified as a bona fide promotional event, a bona fide tasting room, and retail space to promote the product, that is all covered under these uses as defined and connected to the liquor licenses. Events that would go beyond that use, say there's a folk concert or a sporting event or a wedding, that still falls under our standing category of a special event, which is also a conditional use. So there could be a scenario under which an applicant is moving forward with an application for a farm brewery application, but also applies for a special events conditional use at the same time, or maybe at a later date once the business is established. And those would really be two very separate reviews, very separate findings. So just to make that distinction clear.
If I read this correctly, they're only allowed like a maximum of 6 ounce tasting of the product. Mm-hmm. So if they had a wedding, would they be restricted to the 6 ounce?
See, that would be a completely separate application, and if you have a special
event, one would
event,
supersede the other one? I mean, that's what their base is 6 ounces maximum.
Right. But if I want to hold a wedding at that venue, I can purchase their product for consumption for my guests, which is outside of the tasting room and under the tent or whatever the case may be.
and that's where
For which you would need a special event
And permit
approval.
or application, yes.
Approval,
That's
which
my
is a
understanding.
conditional use.
And that's where that intertwining of uses gets more intense, a little more complicated, and is appropriate to be reviewed by the board under two separate standards for the same property.
And under Mr. Drummond's comment, that would be a one-time permit for that specific event?
No. No, is there a one-time special event permit? I don't think there is.
No,
No,
there is.
you'd have to get conditional use approval.
You would have to get conditional use approval in order to apply for those permits, and it would be likely that under that review for a special event, not affiliated with, say, a farm brewery, that the planning commission would set a limit on the number of events per year, the time of those events, the time frame, when the music has to stop.
It wouldn't necessarily be this body. I think you meant to say Board of Appeals?
Yes, Board of Appeals.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Because currently the special use
There
is.
could be a site plan component to it. You just never know.
Okay.
Currently, the special use now is like limited to 12 or 14
Special events?
special events, correct? a year,
20 a year.
or 20 a year?
But it's less in the critical area, as I recall.
I thought it was maybe 12 in the critical area.
Yeah.
So, but as I was trying to illustrate, in trying to illustrate it, I think it illustrates that it's very complicated. But if I flip through this chart, which, wait a minute, my page down isn't working. Okay, there we go. You'll see that the color coding is not very consistent. But you don't have this. You have the chart without color coding. So it's really hard to say what is typical in other jurisdictions because there are caveats and special conditions and thresholds. And when we worked this out and did look at a lot of these provisions, we cherry-picked from Talbot County and St. Mary's County because those were more closely related to what we had already. And what I did through this chart was I found what I thought was a reasonable threshold and put it before you, and that altered the 50% limit to a 2-acre minimum of product produced on site. So that's the only change that you've seen to this draft amendment, changing that 50% for your consideration to a 2-acre threshold, which is in red on page 4 of 8 of your staff report. There are several jurisdictions that have a 2-acre threshold. But like I said, that varies. A lot of jurisdictions, after the startup years, maybe 1 or 2 startup years, elevates that minimum requirement of acreage that should be in production for the end product. So.
So do you think acreage or Maryland ingredients? What do you think is your better recommendation to this board? I mean, if you start taking acreage, depending on what you plan on distilling or brewing, I'm just asking the question.
I think that a 2-acre minimum is the easiest to quantify, and I might, if Vivian's in here, I might ask Vivian to weigh in. We're looking for a way to actually enforce. And if inspectors have to attempt to quantify Maryland product and look at receipts, that gets a lot more gray. And we were trying to just keep it as simple as possible and supportive of the industry. And it seems that a 2-acre minimum is a reasonable threshold. We heard that in testimony in May.
Based on Tom Jackson's comments, didn't he indicate that like hops can't be made in Maryland? It just isn't a good material to manufacture beer?
Well, Sharon, I think and I've learned this from a somewhat related debate that's going on in Dorchester County, that it's not necessarily 2 acres of hops or wheat or barley or rye. It could be 2 acres of strawberries that go in wine, or 2 acres of whatever people put in beer nowadays. Or it might be 1 acre of wheat and an acre of blueberries that goes in some product, I don't know. So I'm learning that people put all kinds of things in these products.
Okay.
I think to continue the conversation, Ms. Dobson, remember testimony last time, 2 months ago, that a lot of these operations are in North County, their proximity to the Delaware line. It becomes problematic that you cross that line and you're non-compliant. Yet it's in their business model to buy local, and should we really get into a differentiation between crossing a state line Obviously, we'd like to support Maryland business and local as possible, but if you live in Marydale or Sothersville and you can throw a baseball across the line, is that seems to me a bit more restrictive in where you buy your product, right? With the percentage piece that we were discussing last time.
I think when you call up Mr. Stevens to talk about his packet, I do think I think Mr. Falks might be here to be able to talk about that threshold and growing needs as well. So you have an expert opinion on hand.
So, are there any questions of Ms. Murdoch? Thank you for pulling all this together. A lot of
Good
interesting
job.
reading material regarding the different licensing and requirements and how a Class 5 license incorporates subsequent licenses or kind of encapsulates those requirements. One thing, and I may have missed it, did we have some kind of food provision in here if they were going to do breweries? And I think that's in the state
It
licensing, right?
is, so we're
Okay.
we're referencing the state license, so whatever is sanctified in there would be acceptable by definition for us.
And if I heard you correctly, you said you wanted to expand this to countryside zoning as a conditional use.
It was included initially.
So it's already included? Okay. Can you pull up the map and show us all the countryside availability?
I can try.
Just so we kind of get an idea of what
No one-
conditional
Well,
door
About 90% of the critical area in Queen Anne's County is countryside.
So, let's see.
May even be more than 90%, I'm not sure.
The scale of QAC map is such that when you zoom so far out to see
Right.
countywide, that it's not going to show you the zoning. You have to actually zoom in. Countryside is just ag that has some component of critical area.
That's what I was going to say. It's really hard to show on our property
Okay,
view.
that's fine. You don't have to pull it up.
Okay. The internet's working slowly anyway, so.
So if there's no other questions for Ms. Murdoch, I guess, is Mr. Stevens under public comment? Okay.
Is it okay if I address the planning commission from here? No.
Can't hear you.
No, you can't. Thank you, planning commission. Joe Stevens on behalf of Mr. Kip Fuchs and Two Sons Farm outside of Queenstown, which, you know, is Mr. Fuchs is right here. And what I thought is maybe he can come up and answer some of your questions and describe the hops production a little bit. I want to thank the staff, as well as Mr. Drummond, for what they've put together. They really addressed a major concern in regards to that ingredient issue, because he wasn't going to be able to do business. I would respectfully ask, after Mr. Fuchs speak, that I address you on the conditional use Board of Appeals issue versus non-Board of Appeals, and just ask for some additional consideration on that issue alone. Ultimately, it's your decision, and you know, you've assisted quite a bit already, but I do want to address that one issue. So if I could have Mr. Fuchs come up and talk to you about the hops and describe the operation a little bit, I think he can answer your questions. He's been operating in Baltimore County and now intends to operate outside of Queenstown.
Good afternoon or good morning. So,
Mr. Fuchs, can you identify yourself?
yeah,
Where are
my
you
name's
from,
Kip
for the record?
Fulks. I'm the owner of Two Sons Farm. I'm actually also the owner of Big Truck Farms in Baltimore County, which we've been through a very similar process where Baltimore County has a special exception, very similar to the conditional use that you guys are looking at. The production of hops in Maryland is really about the variety. There's hundreds of varieties of hops. Some just won't grow here. We've found that Cascade and Chinook and a very few Hardy will grow in New York and Maine and Vermont, and those are doing well. We did lose a lot of other ones that didn't do well. They don't like mildew, they don't like moisture. We did a big study for the soils here in Queen Anne's County. They drain really well. That's what the hop plant wants, hot sun and dry roots. It doesn't like that early morning moisture that we tend to find in northern Baltimore County more. And we've spent about 5 years figuring out all this. And we have five 5,000 plants to begin with, and now we have 17,000. So we've added over the years because we've found the right variety. We'd also like to look at things like strawberries, things like grain. We would like to expand past hops to use the whole farm, not just where the hops are. This is a 260-acre farm here in Queen Anne's County. The intent would be to start with hops, but really to move towards grain and other products that we could do more on a massive scale. Hops really is in the Northeast. Oregon, Idaho, and Washington do 90% of it, and it's thousands of acres, and it's huge equipment, and it's labor intensive, and we're learning that. The conditional use, much like Baltimore County's special exception, it limits the ability of an entrepreneur, a small farmer, to get in there quickly and start doing it. It's going to go to review. What I believe is already covered in the state, which says you're only allowed these type of events, you're only allowed 12 of them. You're a farm brewery, you're not allowed to serve other alcohol. You have limited hours of operation. We can't stay open till the wee hours. We can't serve mixed drinks. We can't serve food like a restaurant. And I believe they did that so it didn't compete with restaurants. It didn't compete with bars, mainly during the lobbying phase of this bill being passed in 12 with O'Malley. So I believe the state has done a lot of that. Now, at the county level, there's probably some things that should be considered. What's going on around the site? I believe promotional events would be the biggest issue. And so what we're asking today is to look at promotional events and marketing events to be the conditional use, but the production of the beer and the growing of the hops be of right. And so if someone wants to go above and beyond and start driving a lot of traffic through promotional events, and we had a lot of this in Baltimore County, weddings specifically, that immediately kicks it to a conditional use. It took me 3.5 years in Baltimore County because they have a special exception. And it's lengthy and it's time consuming, and that is a big concern of mine for you guys to hear as an entrepreneur that wants to invest in this county. My wife and I are moving. We have a house on the Wye River. This is where our home is. We want to operate the brewery and live in Queen Anne's County. We've also put a significant amount of time and money already into the project, and with the staff helping us review what a good site plan looks like. So we're ready to move forward. I'm concerned that it'll now get kicked to a conditional use. So I can answer questions about the hop business, the brewing business. I am this is not my background, so I've done a lot of learning in the last 4 or 5 years. And I think you guys are asking all the right questions.
So would it be your intent to file for a brewer's license or a distillery license?
Brewer's license. I have no interest in hard alcohol. I want to teach my sons the craft of beer. That I'm not sure. You guys are kind of lumping them all together. In Baltimore County, it is a farm brewing license. We are not allowed to entertain wine and distilling. My intent would be to do the same thing in Queen Anne's, stick with beer.
And if I'm not mistaken, you have to follow all the ATF regulations for
I have
brewing.
to have
And
federal and state. I have to follow all, because it's an alcohol production, and so they are very regulated. I can't get my brewer's license until I give them a laundry list. In Baltimore County, you can't get the final approval until you get your fire marshal, your UNO, and all that. So it's even tied to some of the building code to make sure that the brewing facility meets all the standards.
now, is that an additional cost to you every time you decide to make from a wit beer to a Weiss beer to a stout? Each particular, I guess, product requires its own separate ATF blessing, correct?
Brewing and seltzers, which are popular, all fall under one.
Okay.
If I was to do any type of hard liquor, which is what I classify it as, distilling is a separate process with separate machinery, with separate regulatory issues. So my brew kettle can only brew beer. It's not even, it doesn't even have the right setup to brew other alcohol. So it's craft beer. Now you can get a craft beer that has a 9% and it's more like a malt liquor, but that's about as high as it goes. And generally you charge more for those than you would a regular beer. And you're right, the tasting, the 6 ounce and the 12 ounce tastings, those are separate than what you're allowed to do. I can't, if I was to do a wedding under the special events and say you guys gave us that conditional use and we had a wedding, I have to follow the farm brew alcohol laws. I can't go and put hard liquor in a wedding that's on my facility. I do not have that license. It's not the way it works. I can't serve very distinctly the controlled of which alcohols I can serve. I am only allowed to serve craft beer.
You can get a one-day license.
Yes, yeah, I would have that license as a
You
farm
get a
brewer.
one-day license, a catered license.
Yeah, the caterer could.
Caterer would probably.
The caterer could bring that, and they would be held to whatever the caterer could do, not the farm brewery. That's a separate entity than me. Some people in venues have both of those licenses. That's not my intent. We wouldn't be looking for a caterer's license.
Catering license.
Remember, when we change the code, we don't do it for a use, we do it for all the potential uses in the county.
In following up, again, I don't want to understate, I appreciate the time staff spent and allowed me to participate on behalf of Mr. Fuchs, give him information and so on. When you look at the table that staff put together so well, you'll see that the counties, I believe most of them, the majority of them, allow the use with conditions not having to go to the Board of Appeals. When you look at the Eastern Shore in particular, just about every county except for Worcester County on the Eastern Shore allows the use with conditions. You know, they state a bunch of conditions, but you don't have to go to the Board of Appeals. And the Board of Appeals, quite candidly, even before COVID, is a 6-month process. And it's a hearing where you have to meet, you know, certain legal standards, and it creates uncertainty. Now, look, it's not the end of the world. If you decide it, Mr. Fuchs is going to make his, you know.
And we did it in Baltimore County.
Yeah, I mean, so it's not the end of the world. We're just asking you to consider that in regards to whether the county can do it that way and allow this to move through. Now, I also submitted an ordinance amendment, not as comprehensive as what Ms. Mordock provided, but that broke down the use of the alcohol production facility, farm alcohol production facility, and what it suggested, and what we'd ask you to just look at and perhaps consider if you see appropriate, is that the brewing facility, the production, and the tasting room would be allowed by right, but promotional events would have to go to the board, just like any event, special event that would be, you know, on the Board of Appeals right now. So it would have to go to the Board of Appeals. So Mr. Fuchs, because Mr. Fuchs would be able to, if he got his site plan approved, which will be before you, it's been filed and reviewed already once, if it'd be before you, you'd approve the site plan. If he wanted to do promotional events, he'd have to go to the Board of Appeals in addition. That's the threshold we're asking you to consider, and at least from my understanding of some of the earlier staff concerns, maybe not all of them, and I don't want to say that that's the case, but some of the earlier ones is that the promotional events morphing into special events and not having control over that was of concern. How large is a promotional event? I know the state regulates, you know, certain numbers of them and so on, but those things can still get out of hand, which the staff had indicated. And so that's why we came up with this threshold. And we just, you know, request that you all look at that and consider whether or not that would be an appropriate
I would press upon everybody to understand, as a business person, as an entrepreneur, or even as a small startup farm, to not be able to understand what you'll be allowed to do in your business is a big gray area. And so, am I going to be allowed to have events? Am I going to be allowed to have a tasting room? Am I going to be allowed to have a tasting room the right size to meet my financial requirements? All of that gray area for a small business owner to start, those are actually the questions that I like to answer up front, so I know what the business plan is going to look like. And so I think in Baltimore County, it was really difficult. Selling hops as a standalone business, it's not a business. It is a production, so you can make your own beer, so you can't just exist by selling your own ingredients. It just doesn't add up. It's much better to keep it in traditional crops. So I think that unknown is what we're asking, but we definitely understand the conditional use around the events and promotions, which seems to get everybody very nervous, and some people have abused that right, and they have in Baltimore County too. The judge issued certain regulations to our special exception, and I could, you know, if you're curious to know what he did after 2.5 years of doing this, I can explain it. He took our events from 12 to 6, And he said, after a year with no violations, you can go back to 12. He took my hours of operations from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. to noon to 8. And he said, after a year, no violations, you can go back. So he said, your production, after a year, you can up your production to what the state allows, 15,000 barrels. You're only allowed 5,000 barrels. So he basically said, show me you're a good operator. And after a year, you can come back and request
Is that
this.
because you were found to be a bad operator?
When he said judge, what he means is the hearing examiner, which is like the Board of Appeals.
They have one
They have,
judge. that sits in-
and they're referred to sometimes as judges. You have a hearing examiner.
he's a judge.
You take the.
He'd like to be called a judge.
Judge memorandum is
But
the
he's
judge
not a
that sits in
judge.
Baltimore County that oversees. It's not a commission as you guys. So it wasn't.
It's who you take
It wasn't
the
a wasn't a
special
failure
exception
on
to.
something of my part. It is the required process in Baltimore County to get the approval of a special exception from the judge.
Right, that's right.
Well, if I correctly understand,
Sounded like that.
Sorry, my lawyer.
if I correctly understand what the staff has proposed, there is no uncertainty into what a liquor license holder would be permitted to do. Whatever the liquor license allows one to do can occur. And that is, if 12 promotional events are permitted under the liquor license, you have certainty as to that. That couldn't be changed by the Board of Appeals, for example.
I don't have a certainty until it's approved by the commission, and the commission can put rights on top of.
And the Board of Appeals then, as I understand it, accepts the maximum amount of use of the property permitted under the liquor license. Am I correct? And then assesses the impact of the use permitted under the liquor license on neighboring properties. As I understand what's being proposed. Is that essentially it?
That is correct.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of how the board might make their findings, but the intention is to allow, what is outlined in those licenses.
Liquor license, make sure.
Liquor licenses.
So we have clear what licenses we're talking about. So if you assume a certain set of activities, let's call it activities, allowed under the liquor license, the Board of Appeals is then asked to assess that use and its impact on neighboring properties, if I correctly understand what the staff is proposing. There's certainty as to the set of activities permitted by the liquor license. There is some uncertainty, I agree with this, on whether or not the board believes that there is an adverse impact on neighboring properties from that set of liquor license activities.
Can I stop you right there, Mr. Drummond? Bruce, have we lost connectivity with our Zoom?
We did in the room, but people are still able to watch. I
Okay.
believe, I just can't talk to them right now.
Don't want to belabor this, because as we said in the beginning, what this commission decides, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
And
But
can I
I
also
do,
point out to your client that this is not Baltimore County and nothing takes 2.5 years?
no, but the Board of Appeals, well, I don't know about that. But the Board of Appeals, the Board of Appeals process is, I'm finding, before COVID, at least 6 months to get through the entire process. But anyway, put that aside. We've made this request because it's similar to what other jurisdictions have done. It's worked in other jurisdictions. And so we think it's a reasonable request, but if you decide different.
Yeah, we just wanted to be
Yeah,
able to
we-
talk about what we see as some of the things. Again, not the end of the world, but we wanted to be able to speak intelligently about the business we have started in Baltimore County and what we would like to do in Queen Anne's.
Did you have any violations whatsoever in Baltimore County? Okay.
We're right across from the historic church. We believe it's going to be a beautiful site, right off Route 50, where people remember something different and use agricultural for what I believe it's going in the future, which is niche crops. And so I think that that's our intent, but we understand the heavy burden you guys have on, making sure all of it's done the right way. So thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. Before we continue, I'm going to ask that we take a 5-minute break so that we can get back online with the public in case there's any additional public comment that may want to be brought forth. So at this time, we'll take a 5-minute break. Call the meeting back to order at this time. We are currently in discussion for the text amendment for County Ordinance 20-08. At this time, we would like to continue with any public comment, if any.
You know Sharon's not up.
Oh,
I asked her to join back in. I haven't heard from her yet.
stand by as we're missing counsel. No, we have counsel. We're missing.
Secretary.
Sorry, Chris.
I'm here, I think.
Need new glasses.
There we go.
There she is.
Welcome back, Sharon. Okay, at this time, we will resume county text amendment, or text amendment county ordinance 20-08. Bruce, is there any additional public comment at this time?
We do. We have some people waiting in Zoom, so I'm going to go over to Zoom. We're going to mute the room. And for everyone in here, you won't be able to talk to anyone that's in Zoom until we come back into the room. All right, so I'm going
Carmen. Today's my birthday and marks the 6th anniversary of me living on my property, which abuts 2 sons. I'm a bit concerned that I know less about what the real plans are with land use. I have some other questions and concerns. I don't have enough information, and I am wondering if we could gather more information before we give them a little bit what seems to me like a blank check, an open slate. I wasn't prepared to talk today. I was prepared to watch and learn, but I don't have enough information to really understand where some of these, where the hops plants are going to be, where the events buildings are going to be, and the land itself is not being used for anything that has lights and sound. So I think we need a site plan before we can start understanding how you're going to use this land, Mr. Falk. That's really all I have to say. I need information. I'd like to be on record that I think we need more time. Thank you for your time. I'm muted. 208 Surrey Lane. My deed last name of Schmidt. Surrey, S-U-R-R-E-Y. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So, Ms. Schmidt, thank you for your comments. As we
sorry, she can't hear. Mike, I need you to. All right, we're back.
I don't think that was Ms. Schmidt. I think that was, her name was Carmen Renee.
Carmen Renee.
So, Ms. Schmidt, was that you? Raise your hand.
Okay, she raised her hand.
Ms. Schmidt?
Last name was Schmidt.
Oh, okay.
SCHMIDT was what I had. So, Ms. Schmidt, this is not a proposal specifically for Mr. Fuchs. This is a text amendment to the county ordinance to allow for a farm breweries or distilleries that are in conjunction with a Maryland state liquor license issuance and the restrictions tied to those. So this is not something specific to one particular property. this would be available to all agricultural properties and as a conditional use to countryside properties, which typically are within the critical areas, or closest to the critical areas, ultimately. So if Mr. Fuchs elects to do something on that property, building-wise, if this text amendment passes, or if he plans to just build a barn, he would still have to come through the county and obtain proper permits, depending on the size. Staff would handle it, or it would have to come to the county, to the planning commission. So he is, at this point in time, not able to build anything or do anything with that property. This is just a text amendment to identify certain obligations that would have to be met, to include obtaining that Maryland state liquor license and making sure that that use was allowable within the county. So if you have any follow-up, Ms. Schmidt, we would welcome that.
I'm going to mute our room.
Thank you. I do understand. My last name is actually legally Carmen Renee. I just do not have the time or the money to go through the process of changing my deed from my married name into my divorce name. So my legal name is Carmen Renee. What you'll see on the documents is Schmidt. So I do understand what you are saying, that this is more of a process about the code, but it seems that Mr. Fuchs and his attorney have come in, and it seems like it is a very specific circumstance. And that's why I am a little concerned about their concerns with timeframes and not being held off from being able to push their agenda forward. I absolutely understand that you are working, and I respect that. Thank you.
Do you need to respond or move on to? Okay. Next up, we have Kirsten. Please introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Good morning. This is Kirsten Siegel. I live on 202 Surrey Lane. I'm actually a neighbor of Carmen's who just spoke. I guess, I just wanted to make a comment. I was a little confused. I thought this was a review of the bill, which it sounds like that's what it is, but is there a portion of this where there's an application and then each one gets reviewed based on the compatibility of the neighborhood? Is that what's being looked at? I guess probably where Carmen's coming from is we thought this was just the review and now we're talking about other things. So it's a little concerning, but this is just about the bill and review, correct?
Our room. I'm going to mute us, and I'm going to ask Mike, and we're back in the room.
So what this hearing is about is this commission will be making a recommendation to the county commissioners. By law, this board can only make a recommendation to the county commissioners. The county commissioners, at their own choosing, can take our recommendations or not take them. They have asked us and appointed us to these positions to provide them good guidance. So we will take all the information that we have here and make a recommendation, whether it be favorable or unfavorable, in part or in whole, to the text amendment ordinance that has been submitted. So the county commissioners actually have the final vote, but what we are determining is if this use will be consistent with the comp plan and or the land use articles. And because this brewery or distillery was not listed in our current uses, we have to add that in order for it to become a conditional use or an allowable use within that particular zone or district. So that's what we're doing now. We're reviewing the proposal that's been set forth. A text amendment can be submitted by the public anytime in February. I believe it's just February, correct? Yes. And then either staff or the Planning Commission can make any recommendation for a text amendment throughout the year, as can the county commissioners. So with that, that's what we are doing here now. We're reviewing and making a recommendation to the county commissioners whether or not to allow this particular use as an allowable or conditional use to the codes. I hope that answers your question, Ms. Siegel.
And that's all for our Zoom comments. We do have one email.
All right, can we go back to Ms. Spiegel and make sure she
Yeah, sure,
hasn't...
sure thing. All right, I'm going to mute us.
Yes, thanks for explaining that further. I just got confused when we started talking about other topics, and then I thought, boy, do I need to say something. But I appreciate that, and I just wanted to raise my concern, in the event that, we learn some additional information that I'd like to, be informed about. Particularly in regards to, the facilities, I guess special events planning. Thank you.
Back over to you, Mike. We're back in the room, and we do have one email. All right, this email comes from Brian and Shauna Truitt from Patriot Acres Farm Brewery. We've read the proposed changes to the text amendment and recommend removing both the 2-acre requirement and anything referencing special events. We first inquired about possibly opening a distillery operation with the county in November 2019, and some of the first responses were to keep whatever proposal was provided in line with the Eastern Shore and ultimately Talbot County. Now we find out that Talbot has no restrictions, besides having 20 acres of ag zone property, so instead of adjusting fire, Queen Anne's has now doubled down on being one of the most restrictive counties in the state, and when it comes to farm alcohol production. If you look at Kent, they similarly have no restrictions as well. Why set a new standard on the Eastern Shore when both of our neighboring counties already have similar standards in place that we can easily adhere to? When the county first looked at drafting this text amendment, they compared these farm alcohol production facilities to that of a roadside produce stand and applied the same restrictions to the original proposals. We are talking about two totally different things, but the county can't seem to relinquish putting more restrictions on any farmer who might want to start promoting agritourism to keep their farming operation alive. When I think about farm trying to start what we have now deemed an alcohol production facility, I think how easily we should all make it for all farmers and not just those that are well off and just moved to the area. Farmers are starting these types of endeavors because they are low on funds or their current operations are producing the revenue flows that they used to. We are not talking about professional brewers continuing to operate from another location. The proposed restrictions from the county only makes it harder on these farmers who are looking to expand. We haven't had a single problem with the current Queen Anne's County wineries or farm breweries to this date, so why reinvent the wheel and stir the pot? I spoke with Al Castanelli from the former Castanelli Vineyards a couple of weeks ago at his distilling operation in Chestertown. He informed me that he was permitted to distill by Queen Anne's County over 6 years ago. He was also on agricultural zone property. Why was this never brought to light if that was approved by the county? Why has this new effort been made into such a huge ordeal? A standard has already been set, evidently, but no one either wanted to bring this up or no one from the Planning and Zoning Office knew it existed. Queen Anne's County has wasted almost 9 months working on this when this type of activity was already approved 6 years ago. As far as the special events addition to this amendment goes, we think that language is better suited for another text amendment. Not only have they not identified what they consider as a special event, but there's no clear path of getting these special events approved. It's hard enough getting a permit in the county, so now we're going to have the same office approve special events for these farm alcohol production facilities. The state already makes this a requirement, at least for farm breweries. Again, someone didn't read the current laws on the books. In conclusion, our farm could easily meet the requirements for 2 acres of a specific ingredient, but we remember how hard it was starting up and getting our current operation underway. Added restrictions would only prevent farmers from even trying to start a new agritourism operation. When you come across the Bay Bridge, the sign says, "Welcome to Queen Anne's County, pride of the Eastern Shore." Let's do our best to keep that flow of traffic in our county instead of allowing them to go to other counties that have a hand up in the whole agritourism business. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bruce. No other public comment, emails, or texts?
That concludes this section.
All right, so hearing no additional public comment, we will now close public comment, and we will open up discussion here amongst the commission members for comment, questions of Ms. Murdoch.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, I don't know, it's a question, more or less a comment or an observation, but it's also sort of partially directed both at staff and the commission. Taking into consideration Mr. Truitt's testimony and Mr. Falk's testimony earlier when he gave the example of, he sort of had a probationary period where he was allowed to do certain volumes, and then after a certain amount of time, he was allowed to expand that operation once he sort of proved his due diligence and his professional endeavors and business acumen. And Mr. and Mrs. Truitt's comments about the 2 acres might be burdensome, especially for a new startup. Is there an opportunity or a space in this, what Ms. Mordock commented about the 2 acres in red on page 4 of 8, that we do something similar, that the first 2 years, I don't know what that number is, it's 1 acre. And if you get to 3 acres and you're still, you are then required to go up to that 2 acre threshold, so that these new business operations, they don't go 0 to 60 instantaneously. I'm wondering if that's something we could consider to accommodate the newer, smaller, younger farming operations that are trying to get this started but maybe don't have the capital behind them, or the real estate and the equipment and whatever the variable is. Would that be something that we could entertain to address that concern that Mr. Truitt brought up, one of his concerns? Is that a consternation for compliance in the county's eyes? I don't want to put you on the spot, Ms. Mordock, but that's why I prefaced this by I want to sort of just put it out there for contemplation.
What would the capital cost be of planting 2 acres rather than 1 of whatever you choose to plant?
Well, perhaps that 1 acre delta is commodity crop that he needs to, to make funds on, to make money at, to bridge that gap, or as they convert from a more traditional commodity crop rotation, corn, soybean, into a more diversified, right? You do it sort of conservatively, slowly. That's just where I'm thinking of.
I would expect that the capital cost would be in the equipment needed to produce the product, not to plant an ingredient in the product. Or an ingredient that's going into the product. I don't know. It just occurs to me that might be the case.
I don't want to speak on the enforcement end, but I think as long as there's a quantifiable component, that's what we're looking for. And we were looking for something that seemed reasonable and would be consistent throughout the 3 types of uses that we're putting under our umbrella alcohol production facility. 2 acres is a threshold that many other jurisdictions have used. Some jurisdictions simply cite that the ingredients must be primarily grown on site, which is difficult to quantify, but it's a lot more vague.
Well, I'm a big fan of the 2 acre, or X, that is very easily identified and determined from either a field survey or Google Earth or something. You can look at a map and say, yes, there's a building here, yes, that's about 2 acres, versus like the examples discussed earlier about having an inspection officer go through receipts with a calculator and spreadsheets. That seems onerous on both parties. I don't know. I don't know if there's an answer here.
And if this use is accessory, which it is, this is an accessory use to a working farm, it seemed reasonable that a 2 acre crop on a working farm would be appropriate, or not a burdensome threshold.
Right, but what's the minimum? 10 acres, right, for this, if I recall correctly from the... So that's 20% of your operation.
Did they set forth?
I don't think we have.
That would be in the state law. Is that what you're talking about in the liquor?
Is that where I'm remembering the 10%, 10 acre minimum?
I don't know. Have to look.
Let me see. But the code.
All right, Joe says it's 10. Well, that's not I promised I wouldn't comment.
Just getting back to the capital, like, if I had to expend 20%.
Is it really going to be a farm, or is it really going to be an alcohol production facility when you think about it?
Oh, I see that point as well. But looking at the math, it's 20% of my budget. If I had to put that on the chopping block, that, as a fiscal conservative, that causes pause.
I think startup costs can't be cheap all the way across the board. So I think if you have a 10-acre farm, if you're gonna be committed, you're gonna take 20% of your farm and invest in that to make this operation work. I do understand your concerns and appreciate, lowering it to 1 and possibly going to 2. I think that raises enforcement issues that, our current zoning administrator would then have to enforce and keep track of. They made mention of Casanelli's brewery, or distillery or something.
It's neither.
I
It
have
was a
no
vineyard.
record of.
It's a winery.
It's a winery.
Yeah.
On 213.
Wasn't distilling anything.
Yeah, the nearest distillery, I think, is in Kent County, right, or Cecil?
That's one on Kent Island.
Well,
Not on a farm.
Right, well, on a farm, though, it's in Kent or Cecil. Cecil. But, Vivian, do you have any comment as our zoning administrator?
No,
Okay, come on up, have a seat. Please identify yourself.
Vivian Swinson, zoning administrator, Queen Anne's County. The issue we had with the uses, and I won't say Mr. Casanelli's, was enforcement. Most people had events on the weekends that if you have 200 people on a farm and your tasting room is a 10 by 20 room, they're not tasting. They're doing something else, and those activities bothered the neighbors, and that's where we had the problem with enforcement. So I thought if the Board of Appeals could regulate how many people you could have on the property at one time, the hours of the operation, that would make the enforcement portion easier for zoning, rather than us getting calls Friday night or Saturday and then having to send somebody out to say, you can't do this on this property, and put us in the middle of putting people off of somebody's property.
My question, again, being new, is if we're looking at the competitive, and Mr. Truitt addressed it in his email, the competitiveness of Queen Anne's versus the neighboring counties. Should our guidelines not be more in keeping as uniform as possible, so that if a person's making a decision to locate in Queen Anne's County for the brewery, that they would not be tantalized or pulled towards Kent or any other county because of the way the code is written, that they're being pulled in that direction. So trying to get more uniform on the shore, not necessarily 100% because there's different circumstances, but as close as possible in order to not be that a part of the entrepreneur's decision as to where they locate. Is that something we ought to be making sure that we're more uniform in those guidelines? And you've done all the research as to what the different counties require. I'm just wondering if that shouldn't be more uniform, in that decision. It's more of a question.
I go back to the special events thing and what I went through with that. I like to see guidelines, because that was just a fiasco with someone that had no guidelines and no rules and just abused the neighborhood.
The distinction that we're trying to create is that we're trying not to be overly prescriptive, and we are
Right.
trying to be supportive by saying,
We want
if
the
you-
business.
Yeah, if you have the license, then this is your path, and you can do everything as articulated in that license under this conditional use. If you want to branch out into a deeper business model, then you need maybe a second conditional use for special events. So those two ideas are intentionally not commingled. Speaking about trying to get consistency between jurisdictions, I mean, that's always a struggle. It's certainly a struggle with the implementation of like the critical area program and the floodplain ordinance. It's hard to get consistency, and one of the reasons for that, particular to this type of language that is specific to the agricultural zoning district, is every county identifies and zones agriculture differently. So a farm production, say in Kent County, where a farm by definition must be 20 acres, is different than a farm facility in Queen Anne's County, which
It's 5 acres.
is 5 acres. So you're really, while it's attractive to try to be consistent with our neighbors, it's difficult because of the many layers of the zoning codes that are applicable to how we're even framing the code, and then the unintended consequences between that application.
Starting off with different baselines.
You are.
From step one.
You are.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here, boss?
Well, ultimately, we finish our discussion, and then we make a recommendation, favorable or unfavorable, to the Planning Commission. I think what's been put before us by Ms. Murdoch has been extensive, and we do appreciate all the work you've put into it. We know we asked a lot of you, and thank you for putting this together. You know, in reviewing the percentages and knowing that Queen Anne County is, the average farm is 5 acres, changes things a little bit, which now if you're taking 2 acres of that, but we really don't want, you know, 35 or 40 farm breweries either. But that's not, ultimately, we have some, I guess, say in that by processing the law.
Let's be clear.
Yeah.
If you're buying a 5-acre tract of land, and your goal is to put some sort of alcohol production facility on it, that's not an accessory use.
Understood.
In reality, that you're buying it to produce booze. It's different if you've got 200 acres, such as Mr. 200 and something. Sure, it's accessory there, and I get that.
So what do you think about 2 acres, Tom?
I don't know, and just so that we're all clear, right, and council, correct me if I'm not recalling properly, right? The 5-acre comment you just made, I think we determined that there was a 10-acre threshold for a alcoholic, right?
No, but the 5 acre was for farms.
That was the average farm size of Queen Anne's County,
It's not the average size, that's the minimum size for.
Okay, minimum
all the
size.
farm.
But you,
To get a license for what we're talking about, at the state level, you need 10 acres.
10 acres,
So
okay.
if you're buying 10 acres, you're not really buying a farm.
okay, I just didn't want the chairman's comment to go and get cloudy,
No.
right?
That's-
Yeah, I appreciate that.
You're absolutely right.
Make it more cloudy. I mean, ultimately, we're making a recommendation to the commissioners, and this
Right.
will continue its discussion, and these concerns will be further fleshed out. I just, that point that Mr. Truitt and his wife made in testimony, I've been there, I actually went to school with Mr. Truitt here in county, and I'm sympathetic to that small North County approach, and he started off even smaller than he is now. And he slowly bit off, as Ms. Swinson could, you know, he did certain things and he grew his business. Then he expanded a little bit more, and then he was required to replace the porta potties with a septic. And then, right, he grew his business. And I'm just looking at this as that, wow, that would scare me if I had to, it'd scare me. It would cause, you know, greater pause, and maybe that's the threshold, right? So that we don't have every Tom, Dick, and Harry, you know, trying to pound a square peg into a round hole. I don't know if I have a solution at this point.
Well, the answer could be if the property proposed for the use is less than less than X acres, then the acreage assigned to the product to go into the alcoholic beverage.
Proportional.
Yeah.
Or per some percentage, right? Right, because Mr. Folks, you know, you can lose 2 acres on a farm his scale in the seed cushions.
But in order for them to get a liquor license, they have to have a minimum of 10 acres anyway.
Right.
But if it's 20 acres or less, maybe 2 acres is too much.
Be back to percentage.
Yeah, making it more complicated as we go. Keep spiraling down.
Then you're going and looking at receipts again.
Right, yeah,
and,
right.
You know, and, you know, percentage of Maryland product versus if you're right in Marydale, as we talked about earlier, throwing a baseball literally across the state line and buying from that farm, you know, they're literally touching. So.
How about, again, I don't want to make a motion on this, but how about if, you know, the first, let's just for sake of discussion, 3 years. You don't have to have the minimum of 2, but once you get to that 3rd year, you have to show Vivian and her staff that you're at 2 acres of product. Again, not holding any one of those numbers, but that gives a little bit of a room of comfort to a farm like the Truitts.
But what does 3 years do?
And to Mr. Folk's point, there's the known entity. In 3 years, I have to have done enough to get to that point where I now have to meet that next threshold if I want to continue. Or if I go 2.5 years in and it's not working, I'm back to corn and soy rotation. I don't know. I miss Tom Jackson, quite honestly.
I don't understand why 3 years, why pick 3 years?
I just think it gives the business operation side of things a stepwise process.
But he's already got a stepwise, he's got to get it in operation before he can get the permit. I mean, the state of Maryland won't give you a.
The state doesn't require you to have 2 acres in hops.
No, but you have to have the 10 acres.
Sure.
They already have their steps in place.
But you don't have to have 10 acres in product you're using in your business, right? You can buy it from the neighboring farm.
No, it's 2 acres too.
Sorry, 2 acres. Follow me?
No.
If I've got a 15-acre farm and I would want to produce beer, ingredients, from day one, the county requires me to have 2 acres of one of those ingredients on property from day
You're
one.
going to have the kettle to cook it in, or are you going to have the
I get all of that.
material?
I get all of that. Right? I bought all the infrastructure. I just don't have the resources to take the crop, the commodity crop, the traditional commodity crop, out of my financial spreadsheet in that first 3 years of business. So the county gives me that 3 years to get my feet under myself, grow my business, advertise, whatever. And then at year 3, plus 1 day, I have to show, you know, Vivian's office that I have a 2-acre plot of whatever that ingredient is that I'm putting in. I don't know if I'm the outlier here.
She's got to check you out twice. She has to check you out the first time when you say that you're going to go do it, and then she's got to check you out again to make sure that the 3 years are up and that you did what you said you were going to do.
I don't think she has to check me out the first time. There's nothing to measure. At 3 years, she has to measure my 2 acres.
They have to make sure that you have all your permits and everything to.
Well, they're gonna have to do that anyway.
Do your beer. What say you? What does 3 years do to you?
Nothing. It's just an inspection. It's just an inspection rotation. Whether I do it the first year or the 3rd year, it's not gonna.
No problem, no difference?
Mm-mm.
I don't have a problem with the 3 years, I just didn't think it was necessary.
Look, I don't have a skin in this fight, or dog in this fight, whatever the comment is.
Yeah, me neither.
I do like beer. But that almost got one of our justices in trouble. Let me retract that statement. I don't know, just trying to address public comments and concerns to the best means possible. That's all.
So, in keeping with the email and their statements, they don't have a production quantity, but they basically say that all the grains, hops, honey, grapes, and other fruit has to be grown on the licensed facility. That could be, just one plant, or it could, how does Talbot do it? Do you know, Amy? Have they quantified that?
See, I have it right here, thanks to Mr. Stevens.
Something has to be produced on site.
Just one thing?
Products, that's all it says, yeah, product. And that's what's out of the land use article, too, the state land use article.
Mr. Chair, in my mind, and I'm new to all this, obviously, but I see the 2-acre requirement as sort of setting a bar of the commitment and readiness of the business to launch and to succeed. So that's how I see it, is that you're making the investment, this is the requirement, and this is how I interpret it, is just setting the bar for however committed and ready the business is to launch a successful venture.
With respect to implementation of this ordinance, right, let's say it's passed by commissioners next month. What's the window of implementation and retroactiveness of text amendments? Is it immediately? Is it phased in?
They're enacted
45 days after its passage.
Okay.
Becomes effective.
46 day.
46.
Regardless of planting windows for agricultural operations?
Yes.
Okay. So if you can indulge me a moment, please. Let's say this passes. Did the Truitts or any other entity, I don't want to single out the Truitts necessarily, but would every entity that's currently brewing under current regs have to go out, start their tractors up and plant 2 acres?
No, they would probably be, depending on whether they have the permits in place that are required now, they would be legally non-conforming.
Legally non-conforming, that's an interesting.
It's a zoning term, which means they have to keep it exactly the way they are. If they make any changes, they lose their non-conforming right.
Well, not any change.
The same as
Generically
grandfathering?
speaking. What?
Same as grandfathering?
Okay, you could call it grandfather.
I don't like grandfather.
Grandfathered means something a little bit different, but essentially they can continue in operation so long as they don't expand. They can't expand without meeting current standards, that it by making it bigger. There's,
Kind of like just putting an addition on your house. You have to have it to the new standards, whatever they are, when you decide to add, right?
Like that.
Yeah. You okay with that?
Again, I don't have the answer. I'm just looking for, maybe I'm diluting it too much to make everybody happy. I appreciate Kathy's comments earlier, certainly, and I think it parallels somewhat what you were saying, Jeff, earlier, about do you rip the Band-Aid off or you tear it slowly? I'm horrible at using analogies that way, and I'm not a business person per se, but I understand what gets me in trouble enough on economics.
No, I appreciate your comments, because I think you bring something to the table. Everybody brings something to the table that's a different perspective that we all need to. Sometimes we get focused on certain visions and thoughts, and we don't look at maybe different angles. So I appreciate your thoughts and comments. They help me think and open my mind as I was trying to figure out a way to maybe reduce the acreage. But, in light of Kathy's comment, I'm inclined to stick with the 2 acres because it does show a certain commitment.
Okay.
But that's my opinion.
I'll punt the hard decision to the county commissioners.
Yeah, well, and purely this is a recommendation.
Right.
The county commissioners will make the final decision. We can go and testify or not. and listen to testimony, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of public comment there as well.
Well, I think it's worth pointing out that Mr. Moran's in the room, so he's heard the discussion and is at least, you know,
Right.
been part of the conversation that's got us to this point.
I don't want to belabor this point any further, but I think every jurisdiction looks to me like they really struggled with this. If you just even look at this first page, you see the diversity in the brewery is a farm of at least 10 acres with at least 1 acre of grains and crops grown on site. Wineries don't have parameters other than they have to be 25 acres, but 25% of the fruit processed has to be processed on site or grown on site. If you just keep going down the list, there are lots of different ways that communities have tried to quantify it, and they've all done it to some degree, other than the jurisdictions that said at least one of the primary ingredients, which made it completely broad. So that's the spectrum. But I think everyone has struggled with this.
Oh, sure. And I think your color coding illustrates that very well.
So, is there any further discussion of the planning commission? Tom?
No, I'm finished.
Karen? Kathy? Teddy? Artie?
Sure.
No? All right. I will entertain a motion for recommendation.
Sharon was pointing at something.
Oh.
I'm not sure if she has something she had to add. Oh, no, she said no. Okay.
So I'll go ahead and make the recommendation. Based on the consistency with the applicable laws noted above and the staff recommendation report, the Planning Commission sends a favorable recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners for text amendment and county ordinance number 20-08 to modify code section 18, section 1, and as outlined above in the staff report. Specifically, the recommendations of the Planning Commission shall include the discussion of our matters here, to include the land use articles and the comprehensive plan, that we believe that the recommendations meet both the consistency with the comp plan and are consistent with the land use articles. For the agricultural and countryside districts, but also the Maryland Department of Agricultural's guidance documents relative to agritourism industry. And further, the amendment is consistent with the similar uses which are subject to the conditional use to project and review the uses prohibited in open space areas.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Hearing none. Thank you again, Ms. Murdoch. Commission members, at this time, we do have a scheduled break, but we just had one not too long ago. I'll leave it up to you whether we continue or if we take a break.
Yep.
Continue.
Continue.
Wallace Montgomery here? I don't see anybody else in the room.
They're in the
Some people
hallway,
are.
and
Want to
I'm
continue,
pulling
Cass?
up their materials right now. I'm excited to introduce you to them.
All right.
We're excited to meet them.
So next on the agenda is the comprehensive plan workshop with Miss Amy Murdoch and Wallace Montgomery.
Okay, I am going to introduce you to Lauren Good and Ray Moravec, who are with Wallace and Montgomery, and I'm going to sit on the sidelines and let them introduce themselves and give you an update as to where we've been and where we're going since they've come on board to help us complete this project. And Lauren, I've brought up your presentation and your report, and you can toggle between the two when you're ready.
Great, thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having us present to you this morning. As Amy mentioned, my name is Lauren Good, and with me is Ray Moravec. So we will be working on this presentation together. Great. So we're going to begin with a brief introduction of our team, followed by an overview of comprehensive plan requirements, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page as far as a starting point. We'll do a brief review of the county's existing plans, an overview and status update of our work that's proposed for the 2021 plan, and depending on time, some discussion topics or potential homework projects. So Wallace Montgomery is a multidisciplinary planning and engineering firm that provides numerous services throughout the Mid-Atlantic region. Our headquarters is in Hunt Valley, Maryland, and we have 4 additional offices in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Delaware, which is where I am located. I will be leading this effort for Wallace Montgomery, overseeing our staff that we have assigned to work on the project, in addition to the 2 sub-consultants that have been selected for the project. Ray is one of Wallace's vice presidents, and he will be providing QAQC services for the overall project, as well as participating in public outreach and other efforts as needed. Our team also includes Remline, which is a public outreach and digital media firm. They will be assisting us in the outreach efforts, the project website, the final document design, and we also have Heritage Strategies on board, which is a planning firm that specializes in historic communities and cultural landscapes. So switching gears, as I mentioned, we wanted to not only have everyone in this room, but the viewing audience as well, have the same starting point for what is a comprehensive plan, why the update is necessary, and the legal requirements for doing one. In general, a comprehensive plan captures how people want their communities to function and grow, includes various elements and visions that are required by the state. It is officially prepared by this commission and then adopted by the county commissioners. Based on changes to state law, it's now required to be updated every 10 years. And in the middle 5 years, the county would have to do a review of the document to see if there have been any major changes or anything like that. It's important to note that a comprehensive plan is not a zoning code, transportation study, a market study, or any of those more detailed studies. A lot of those elements get woven into the plan itself, but it lays the groundwork should the county decide to do those more specific and detailed studies in the future. So comprehensive plans are reviewed for consistency with the state's smart growth and growth management laws, specifically the land use article. And it includes requirements for municipal growth, water resources, and priority preservation area elements. The State Economic Growth, Resource Protection, and Policy Planning Act found in the state's laws also includes 12 visions for a comp plan, and we will get to that in just one second, as well as several other pieces of legislation that have been adopted over the years. So all of the comprehensive plans in Maryland have to bear a relationship to the 12 visions that you can see here on the screen. These include quality of life and sustainability, or a high quality of life that is achieved through universal stewardship of the land, water, and air that results in sustainable communities and protection of the environment. Public participation, where citizens are active partners in the planning and implementation of different initiatives and are sensitive to their responsibilities in achieving community goals. growth areas where growth is concentrated in existing population and business centers, growth areas adjacent to these already developed centers or strategically selected new centers. Community design, which addresses compact, mixed-use, walkable design that is consistent with the existing community character. Located near available or planned transit options, which is encouraged to ensure the most efficient use of land and transportation resources, and preservation and enhancement of natural systems, open spaces, recreational areas, and historical, cultural, and archaeological resources. Infrastructure is another vision where growth areas should have the water resources and infrastructure to accommodate the population and business expansion in an orderly, efficient, and environmentally sustainable manner. Transportation, where a well-maintained multimodal system facilitates the safe, convenient, affordable, and efficient movement of people, goods, and services within and between those population and business centers. Housing, where a range of housing densities, types, and sizes provide residential options for citizens of all ages and incomes. Economic development, where that economic development and natural resource-based businesses promote employment opportunities for all income levels within the capacity of the area's natural resources, public services, and public facilities. Environmental protection, where land and water resources, including the bay and the Chesapeake Bay and other coastal bays, are carefully managed to restore and maintain healthy air and water, natural systems, and other living resources. Resource conservation, which is waterways, forests, agricultural areas, open space, and natural systems and scenic areas are conserved. Stewardship, where government, business entities, and residents are responsible for the creation of sustainable communities by collaborating to balance efficient growth with resource protection. And finally, implementation, where strategies, policies, programs, and funding for growth and development, resource conservation, infrastructure, and transportation are integrated across local, regional, state, and interstate levels to achieve all of the 12 visions that are outlined. The comprehensive plan is also required to include a number of planning elements. So as you can see on this screen in the left column, there are a number of required elements that must be addressed, along with some that are starred that are required if you have those components within the jurisdiction. On the right side are some additional permissive elements that can be included, which I know that the existing comp plan does touch on a number of these areas already. So all of these requirements are again found in the land use article. The comprehensive plan itself has several purposes, including identifying appropriate areas for both development and conservation in the future, recommending appropriate types of land use for specific areas within the county, directing residential and non-residential development, identifying any needed transportation or community facilities to serve those future land uses, and providing strategies to implement the recommendations made in the plan itself. To accomplish all of this, different groups within the county have varying roles and responsibilities. Starting at the top here with citizens, over the past 10 years, as I'm sure you're all aware, citizens have provided comments and questions regarding the existing plan and its implementation since it was adopted in 2010. There's opportunity for direct comment and input as part of this process. But we will also consider past opinions that feed into the county's boards and commissions on an ongoing basis. The identified stakeholders, incorporated jurisdictions, and planning area communities provide a broad array of perspectives and information on the various topics that are found in the plan. Those components, they help to provide accurate and up-to-date information to our project team represent their own interests and encourage others to participate in the planning process. The Planning Commission leads the overall plan's development and ends up in a recommendation made to the county commissioners for the plan's approval. The role is really to oversee the plan's development and our work, review community input and data, work with us to help develop that policy framework, any maps or implementation strategies, make recommendations for any changes to the draft plan once we get that far in the process, and then to ultimately make a recommendation on the plan's adoption. The county commissioners, as mentioned, are the final decision makers on the plan's content. They will, throughout the process, be supporting the plan's development, providing any policy guidance if necessary during the overall process, ultimately adopting the final plan, and then once that occurs, overseeing the plan's implementation. The overall project team is comprised of county staff, its technical committee members, and our consultant team. We will all work together to facilitate this overall process for the county and act as technical advisors. To do this, we are going to be facilitating meetings and workshops, organizing information and data, conducting various types of analyses, developing the project materials, and working with you all to develop these work products and publicize events and conduct outreach. So now a brief background on the existing plan, which was adopted almost 10 years ago. Its overall vision was originally drafted by the county commissioners and modified based on community input that was received during that planning process. The vision emphasizes maintaining and enhancing the county's character while recognizing that it is a quintessentially rural community and preserving it as a great place to live, being predominantly rural with small towns connected by creeks and county roads through fields and forests. It's a good place to work, encouraging agriculture, seafood, and maritime industries, tourism and outdoor sports, small businesses, and high-tech enterprises. It's a good neighbor for the Bay and other Eastern Shore counties as a faithful steward of its natural and cultural heritage. It's a community that protects the expectations and opportunities of all its citizens and where development does not impair the quality of life to be enjoyed by all. And last but not least, it is a county that supports the highest quality of education that seeks to fully prepare its citizens for the future. This plan strengthened the county's longstanding guiding principles, its growth management policies, and recommendations that have been outlined since 1987 to create sustainable communities that are consistent with the 2030 vision for the county and Maryland's smart growth goals and objectives. In addition to the comprehensive plan, additional work has been completed to develop community plans for 3 specific areas within the county. The cover of the Chester-Stevensville Community Plan, which you can see on the screen, is there. It was adopted in 2007. Its vision was developed by a Citizens Advisory Committee for the planning area to provide that families of all income levels are able to obtain secure, affordable housing, maintain decent employment, have useful and safe transportation modes, select from a variety of community parks, recreation and educational opportunities, and maintain the environmental health of their neighborhoods. In addition, let's see, Graysonville. Okay. Graysonville, the plan was adopted in 2010. That plan's intent was to put forth a strategy for responsible growth that recognizes the character of the area and the needs of its citizens now and in the future. Its underlying premise is that with forward-thinking and community involvement, the quality of life for its citizens can be enhanced while accommodating the area's growth and development. And finally, the Kent Narrows Community Plan was developed in 2006. Its vision hoped to establish Kent Narrows as a year-round destination for visitors and local residents while highlighting the heritage of the traditional working waterfront character. For all 3 of these plans, several recommendations and implementation strategies were developed to address the planning issues that were established during each of those processes. So it's our overall intent during this current planning process to not have these 4 separate plans, but really to combine them into one. So we will have sections on each of these communities within the plan itself. And we will also be incorporating select issues and recommendations from other planning efforts that the county has undertaken to provide an update to the 2010 plan. Wallace Montgomery was brought on board to work on this project back in June of this year to facilitate and develop this 2021 plan. In the last 2.5 months, we have accomplished several tasks and begun others, including holding internal project kickoff meetings, developing a detailed work plan that's based on the scope that was provided in the executed contracting, updating our initial project schedule, and developing a draft public involvement plan that I believe was provided in your agenda packet. We've also developed a mock-up of the project website, which we will get into momentarily. We've reviewed the prior work efforts that staff provided to us and began determining where there may be data or information gaps that we would need to fill in and move forward with this planning process. We have started some additional data and GIS resource gathering and worked on some initial plan, organization, and deliverable templates that we will use throughout the process. We've also held staff coordination meetings with Ms. Murdoch and initiated contact with various community departments that we will be interacting with throughout the process. We did hold a status meeting with the county commissioners earlier this week just to give them a very brief update as to where we've been. We are holding this meeting with you today, and moving forward, we will be providing monthly written status reports that will go to both bodies in addition to the meetings that we will be holding with you all. As mentioned, one of our first tasks involved reviewing the prior work that was completed by the previous planning consultants. This included working drafts of various element data and sections such as housing, water resources, and economic development, working drafts of the community plan sections that had been started, and then reviewed meeting and workshop presentations and minutes that had occurred earlier in this process. We've also reviewed the public survey results and the technical committee status updates of the 2010 plan's goals, objectives, and recommendations. And lastly, we did receive some comments from the Queenstown Planning Commission, the Kent Narrows Development Foundation, and Business Queen Anne's. So we wanted to reiterate that we're not starting from square one. We are incorporating the information that has been provided to us and moving on to complete this process with you. So our overall work plan includes 6 tasks and various subtasks. As you can see here, task 1 is project initiation, which we will be wrapping up shortly with this meeting and then finalizing our public engagement plan. Task 2, which we are also working on, includes that conditions analysis and input, where we are collecting and analyzing data, beginning the public engagement process, evaluating the vision statement, and assessing various issues and opportunities within the county. Our third task is in regard to community assessments, where we will build on the community plans that we spoke about previously, but also we will include brief incorporated jurisdiction profiles in the plan itself, just to provide a more holistic look of where the county is. Those will not in any way be in place of those jurisdictions' own comprehensive plans, but just to provide a snapshot of what those jurisdictions are doing and what they look like today. Once that sort of overall background piece has been completed, we will move into the plan development phase, where we will solidify the framework that will be the basis for the plan itself. We will develop the draft plan and the implementation elements. And then we plan to have a presentation where that draft is presented to everyone and the public. That moves us into the adoption phase, where we will be developing some different collateral to use in explaining the plan, getting information out about it, just providing some additional sort of marketing efforts for the plan itself to raise as much awareness as possible. That is also the task where we will hold the Planning Commission public hearing, as well as the County Commissioner's public hearing, and result in the final comprehensive plan document. Throughout this entire process, we will be undertaking project management efforts, which involves coordination among various entities, preparing the progress reports, and updating the schedule as needed. I did want to stress that although these are all distinct tasks, a lot of them do overlap, so you will be seeing that as we move forward. Our next steps will include continuing that analysis portion, but then also beginning the public engagement process and moving on with the remainder of the tasks, or the steps under task 2. As also previously mentioned, we have developed the draft public involvement plan. Public participation is, of course, a very important part of the comprehensive planning process. It helps to ensure that the plan accurately reflects the vision of the community. We wanted to really stress that this process is an update to the 2010 plan, so it will look different than the process did to develop the 2010 plan. We will be updating statistics, figures, text, and whatnot, but building on the basis of the plan that is already in place. Going back to the public involvement plan, it helps us to outline the process and identify some initial stakeholders, as well as various methods of public outreach that we intend to pursue. These would include a variety of public meetings and workshops, news releases, social media, creating and maintaining a project database that includes various contacts that will be somewhat of a listserv to push information out and reminders about upcoming meetings, things like that. And we will also use this to collect and sort public comments as they come in. As you can see here on the screen, this is the project website mock-up that I mentioned briefly before. We have obtained a domain name for the project website, and it's undergoing construction at this time, so it will be populated with various types of information and resources, from some background material to copies of presentations and things like that, for the public to be able to see where we are in the process. It will also include references to any upcoming meetings and workshops, and provide a space for public comment to be received. So the plan, the public involvement plan, also outlines our initial project schedule with an overview, which is on the screen right now. We anticipate holding 11 meetings with the Planning Commission, 6 technical committee meetings, 5 visioning workshops, and 7 special topic workshops throughout this planning process. It is also our intent to hold a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and County Commissioners to publicly present the draft plan, which will begin the official public comment period. This will, of course, be followed by public hearings by the Planning Commission and the County Commissioners. We've included 2 additional meetings in our scope that can be utilized as the county sees fit. One opportunity for this is if you or the county commissioners feel that additional review sessions are needed, we will incorporate those. We'll work with the county to fit those into the schedule and accomplish any objectives that are needed. As mentioned, we're planning 5 visioning workshops, 1 in each of the community plan areas, one in North County, and we are still finalizing a location for the fifth. That's still to be determined where it might best fit in with the area. But all of these visioning meetings will have an overall countywide focus, but then, for example, the one that would be held in Kent Narrows will also have opportunity for participation as far as the Kent Narrows community plan. So we will be continuing that as well. I know that there had been one visioning meeting that had already occurred, and we do have the results of the information that was obtained from that meeting, but because there was such a gap between when that occurred, COVID happened, and now getting back to the point where we can continue with public outreach and input efforts, we thought it best to hold that community meeting again, and still keeping the relevant data, but move forward to have a consistent process at one starting point. The special topic workshops, we intend to hold 7 of them, as I mentioned, and each one will focus on 1 to 2 content areas that shows up within the plan, like housing or land use. These will, of course, be open to the public, but we will also be reaching out to various representatives from relevant boards, commissions, and stakeholder organizations to engage them and make sure that we are getting the appropriate input from all of the various parties within the county. We anticipate that the entire project will be complete by November of next year. And it's important to note that we are planning all outreach workshops to keep in mind any necessary COVID restrictions and requirements. And while we hope that all of these meetings will be in person, we realize that that may not be possible, so we are also looking into holding virtual meetings and things like that, and other ways to supplement those if we're not able to hold them in person. With this extended schedule, we are also going to be able to incorporate data from the 2020 census, which we're happy to have that additional time to be able to do that. That data, the start of that data should be available by April 1st of next year, so we're looking forward to incorporate that. In addition, this process is happening somewhat in tandem to the county's housing study, so we will also be able to make use of that information as up to date as possible, so we're excited to be incorporating that effort as well. So that was a basic overview of who we are, where the process started, where the process is going. So at that point, I just wanted to briefly pause and see if there were any questions or comments before we moved into more of the interactive portion of this morning. Okay, sounds good. All right. So the process that had already started, the previous consultants had proposed 5 plan themes that would, in addition to the 12 visions that I discussed earlier, these would be carried out throughout the plan. You would see where various strategies, recommendations aligned with these. So we're looking to continue this and not start over completely from scratch. So the 5 plan themes that were proposed included fiscal responsibility, sustainable growth, community revitalization, resource preservation and conservation, and health and resilience. So while the overall plan chapters would be somewhat similar to what you're used to with the discrete, say, housing section or land use section, these themes will be continued throughout so that there's a sort of a layer that ties the entire plan together in coordination with the 12 visions. So I know that this is probably the first, or at least one of the first times that you have seen these various themes presented. So we just wanted to see if you had any initial reactions to these, or if there were any that you feel that we are missing, or if you think we are good to start moving forward with the organization as it is proposed.
What I found missing throughout the materials here with comprehensive plan backwards and looking forward is under health and resilience is something that specifically states improving access to high-quality healthcare from pediatrics through geriatrics, I think is an important component of our comprehensive plan moving forward, given the unique nature of our county, some of the obstacles that we face reaching these facilities, whether it's over the bridge or in traffic. But it's just a theme that I found lacking. Queen Anne's County has, I think, one nursing home at present, several very small assisted living facilities, but a lot of our seniors who are opting to leave their larger homes are also leaving the county because there's no facilities here for them, and that's just a small example.
Any other initial reactions to these themes?
Education? Is it included anywhere as far as educational needs spread throughout the county as to,
These don't specifically state that, but we will make sure that that is included. That is definitely an important component. Okay, so with that comment, we will adjust these based on the comments that we've heard here and move forward with these themes throughout this planning process. Okay. All right. So the first, we have a series of questions that we really hoped to be somewhat interactive here, but then also depending on how things go today. We've also set these up so that I am assigning you homework. So I'll play that role today. And this is really to help us learn more about how you see the county, where you see it, how you think it's changed, what is important. And this will help guide us throughout this process. We do intend to complete similar exercises to these with the technical committee and others just to gain that input. But we certainly wanted to start with this commission to get your insight moving forward. So with that, again, the current comprehensive plan was adopted in 2010, so almost 10 years ago. I believe it was in November. So we wanted to see how you think the county has changed since that time, or what is really different now. What are the bigger things that are different from your perspective?
When do you want our homework done by?
I'm thinking that we probably the next meeting that we are intending to be back is in September, so that might not necessarily give us enough time for you to have time to review and provide input, and then us to incorporate it into a presentation. So if we could have something back, say, by that maybe first week of September, and then we can plan for more of an October sort of overall data reveal type workshop, where we can incorporate that component along with some of the other data analysis that we've been conducting.
So you're asking for it September 1st?
If that sounds, does that sound? Sure. Okay. Okay.
I don't have a calendar.
The 7th is the Labor Day weekend, so if we probably could say the 4th, which would be that Friday.
Friday, okay.
Would be a good date for that.
So the 4th.
And I also wanted to check in with you all on how you feel the best way to provide responses to these homework assignments would be, whether it is actually physically filling out the forms that were provided, or when I sent them to Amy, they were in a Word document, so they can be completed electronically and either submitted back to Amy, or they can be sent to me. So really, whatever the commission's preference is for returning that information, whatever is easiest for you all.
Yep, I think a Word document would be great.
Okay.
And then my preference is to send everything through Amy, unless anybody objects.
Okay. So we will make sure to coordinate with Amy on that side of things. I didn't know if you wanted to have any discussion on these questions now, or if you just wanted to sort of get through them and then tackle them as homework.
Let's ask a very general question. So how much of the thought process in looking at the comprehensive plan is going to incorporate current COVID regulations and then the unknown of the effect of the pandemic going forward? For instance, with regard to virtual working now, rather than our citizens leaving the county in droves to work, that there'll be a larger percentage of them staying home, and then that's going to change the picture. Education and other formats. So how much am I supposed to, I don't know, I'm asking myself this question, I'm asking you too. How much of that should I keep in mind if I'm formulating my answers to these questions?
I think it's certainly something that is present on everyone's minds and is something that we need to think about and include somehow in the plan itself. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's hoping that this type of event does not again happen, but knowing that the likelihood of that is not very high. So we would like to be cognizant of that, but then not necessarily create the comprehensive plan throwing status quo completely out the window. So there will be a balance between the two, and certainly I think that what has happened with COVID and working virtually has changed the way a lot of people view their working environments. Some places that did not have any type of teleworking allowed, that's now a possibility. So moving forward, are we going to completely reverse and go back 100% to being an in-person workforce? I think we're going to be somewhere between the two. We also have to be cognizant that not all of the businesses that are out there have the opportunity to work virtually. So how are they going to be impacted if that happens, or will there need to be a complete shift in the mindset, getting away from the requirements of only coming into work, doing your job, and then going home? So I think it's certainly something that we're going to think about. We'll just have to balance moving forward how that works. And I know that there have been some guidance that has been released from, I believe, the American Planning Association, thinking about planning in a post-COVID world. So those are certainly things that we are trying to keep abreast of, and will incorporate to the extent that we can and that we should, and that you feel we should.
I think that's the challenge we have, is it's hard to have that crystal ball of what is going to happen, and as much as we can track what we're seeing, both regionally as well as nationally occur, we'll try to provide what information we're finding back to you all and how that relates. But I'd be in a lot better position if I could tell you what that's going to be moving forward. But all we can do is look at the trends and see. We already are seeing things of, when it comes to businesses and others, already looking at downsizing of space, sharing space, things that they see, because we are going to see this shift of people finding it more convenient to telework, maybe coming in 2 days a week versus 5 days a week. There's already that, a wide array of things happening that we know aren't going to go back to the way it was. And that's what we'll try to educate ourselves as well as you all on those trends that we see.
I know if you talk to any realtor in this county, they'll tell you they cannot keep an inventory of homes in this county because folks are moving here from more populated areas. I know that the commissioners had to do, the county had to do a kind of a redo of our parks and recreation because of what we have to offer here. They became extremely popular for out-of-area visitors, which overloaded the capacity that we had, so they had to, kind of do a rethinking of that, so, because of this.
And there was already a trend happening for, when you think about that from the transportation and the recreational side of, you're hearing the words active transportation and stuff like that, which are these communities and facilities that are allowing that mobility and other things that people are getting outside and doing things that they may not have been doing now locally more than they were in the past of going somewhere to do it. So it's a tough balance that we'll have to work with you all through.
Thank you.
Those guidelines you mentioned on the APA website now, because I hadn't been on there since the conference.
I believe they are, and if it's not a specific guideline, there have been several presentations that allude to it, so I can certainly compile some of that information and include references to that for next time, or I can share with Amy and she can share with you all ahead of time what and where those references might be. Okay. So the next question that we have are really, what are your top priorities or areas of concern that you hope to see addressed in the comprehensive plan update? Again, keeping in mind that it is an update. If there are areas that are lacking within the plan or just not as prevalent because they weren't issues 10 years ago, we certainly would look to include those, but we are, for example, not necessarily going to be throwing out an entire section and rewriting it from scratch. So just to keep everyone on the same page as far as the scope of the assignment that we are going to be working on. So as we've heard, incorporating the post-COVID world into this and perhaps, into economic development and housing is something to address, as well as education, making sure that flows through the plan and how important that is. So is there anything else, that speaks to you right now? And then also as you're thinking about these questions over the next few weeks, just letting us know what you think are the top priorities for us to be focusing on.
A highlight that just came out, excuse me, Ms. Good, nice to meet you. Recently, and Ms. Murdoch was part of this, was the climate resiliency, financing, climate change, and how that relates to development in the county. All right, sensitive areas, you mentioned Kent Narrows, that's sort of the epicenter for Queen Anne's County. Obviously, we thousands of miles of shoreline. That is something that wasn't, I don't even, in the back of the list 10 years ago. Not only is it now on the forefront of the list, we discuss it here when we're approving plans. The county just went through an extensive several-month update of identifying all kinds of, whole host of activities around that. So I think that this redraft update, if you will, should sort of incorporate that new information, the county's emergency updates management with respect to that particular topic.
As we can all see from lately, not only are there things like sea level rise and other things like that, but the increased frequency and severity of storms that we had earlier this month, those are all, right now actually, those are all things that are important to keep in mind moving forward, and how certainly how any implementation item that might be proposed or undertaken, how that will look in 50 or 100 years. It's not necessarily a good idea to build a large-scale facility if it's going to be, or if it's projected to be completely underwater in 50 years. So we need to be as forward-thinking as possible in that regard. And then our last really discussion topic or homework project is a SWOT analysis, which will also help to inform the priorities and areas of concern. But for those that may not know, a SWOT analysis looks at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The strengths and weaknesses side of things are items that are more internal to the county, not necessarily government, but to the geography of the county, that may give the county an edge or a competitive advantage. Or conversely, for weaknesses, something that hinders the county's ability to really reach its optimal performance or reaching its goals. So an example for a strength may be a strong job base in a particular sector, or a growing median income, things of that nature. As far as weaknesses, it could be an excessive number of unhealthy populations, or a higher number of people that aren't graduating from high school. Those are internal to the county and things that could potentially be addressed. For strengths, those are things that we want to, of course, highlight and promote. And for weaknesses, we want to be aware of them, but then also see how we can develop goals or implementation items that might address those different topics. On the opportunities and threat sides, they're somewhat similar, but they are external to the county. So for opportunities, these are things that are out in the world that the county can really use to its benefit. And then on the threat side, these are things that really pose a threat to the county's current or future ability to achieve what it wants to. So an example of an opportunity could be the rivers and bays that you have, and the recreational opportunities that there could be to connect to other jurisdictions as part of a sort of a multi-use trail system. A threat, counties don't really have direct competition as far as county to county. And yes, there is competition among businesses that want to locate here versus another county or things of that nature. But you can think of threats as a way that there could be competition for funding, or different changes in restrictive legislation that really hinder you to achieve what you want to. So those are just some very basic examples. And what's really interesting, and one reason why this was always meant to be a homework project, is that we want you to think about this individually, because what you may think is a strength, you may think of as a weakness. For example, traffic. I know that's a taboo word, I'm sure, but many people may see that as a weakness because it adds to commute times, there's congestion and whatnot. But if there's that, there is that ability to try to capture some of those travelers and increase attendance to local businesses. So it's very interesting when this information is compiled to see how some people think the same topic falls into multiple different categories. So when we receive this information, we will keep the responses, or we will keep them anonymous, as far as the rest of the group won't know who submitted what specific topic. We will pull them all together and list them all out verbatim, and then sort of categorize them. If multiple people are saying things related to emergency services, we'll group that into one category. So you'll see both lists presented, the verbatim list as well as the abbreviated list. And that abbreviated list is really what helps us move forward in prioritizing different efforts and things like that. This is one of the exercises that We're hoping to work with staff and the technical committee on to also get that perspective. Because again, the commission's perspectives as far as these different items differ from staff who sees things from an internal working environment versus how other boards and commissions may see things. So this is always an exercise that we really like to do and also find it very interesting and informative moving forward. Does anybody have any questions about this one exercise? I know sometimes it can be a little confusing, how things fall out, and great. All right. So that pretty much wraps up our initial presentation and initial work that we would like to see from you. And as also mentioned, we'll begin providing additional written updates that will go to both this commission and the county commissioners. That will include information on any major decisions or meetings or things like that that happen, as well as an overall status update of the work that we've been doing. So I know Ray and I thank you for the opportunity to come in and provide you with this in-person status update, and we welcome any comments or questions that you have at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Good. I think the presentation was very good, very informative. We look forward to getting the public, date set. I know the public is anxious. And I look forward to, doing my homework and submitting it and see what, my peers also think are critical issues. I know stormwater rise, it's been a topic of discussion here, as of late, probably over the last 4 months. And it's a very real issue that we need to address, especially because we have so much of our, our county is adjacent to the water in critical areas. So, and, they want to build upon the water or close to, so, that's where the money's at. So we will look forward to working with you and your team, and, we're here to support you in any way we can.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we're very excited and looking forward to this process.
Could we get a copy of the slides?
Yes.
Okay.
2 questions, if I may, if you're finished.
Please.
First of all, you discussed initial stakeholder input feedback. Can you better define the criteria that you're using to identify those initial stakeholders, and what, maybe some examples or a definition of, or how you intend to reach those individuals and engage them specifically?
Sure. So in the, starting on the first page of the public involvement plan, we've identified some initial stakeholders, and we realize that this list will evolve over time. Some of those include the various incorporated jurisdictions, the unincorporated communities within the county, the agricultural community, which is of course a large one here, any state or federal facilities, various community facilities, churches, businesses, emergency services, the school district. So there will be obviously the way that we reach out to these different communities will depend on what the actual component of these groups are. So we, as I mentioned, we do have a public relations firm that is working with us. So not only will they be assisting us with the actual visioning meetings, but then also helping to develop ways to reach out to the various communities. When the project first started, there was I believe it was called the In the Know listserv that was set up. So we've obtained a copy of those email addresses, and we'll also provide the opportunity to continue to add to that list so that anyone in the county who is interested can stay abreast of information as we move forward. For various efforts like the different community meetings or the special topic meetings, for example, for a housing special topic meeting, we will work with the county to identify the different organizations that really have a large part in that topic area. Housing authorities, possibly developers or whatnot, just people who have an interest in those, and we'll reach out to them, with flyers or other email correspondence or whatnot to let them know what's going on. But then also, as I mentioned, our project website will have the opportunity for comments to come in at any time. We will, of course, keep a record of all of those verbatim, and then the way that we intend to address them. And that does not take away from the actual official public comment period, which will, of course, happen after the draft has been developed. So we're really working with the project team to identify these various stakeholder groups, as well as the technical committee, to see who those organizations are. But then also we are going to use email listservs and social media, and work with QACTV and other county resources to publicize different events that are going to occur, as well as when we have some substantial updates to the website. We really want to use the website as sort of a one-stop shop for as much related to the plan as we can, so people will know once it's live that's where they can go to get the latest and greatest information.
Thank you. Second question, please. You mentioned community plans and revisiting them. Can you expand upon that comment? Meaning, are those also being updated and redrafted at this time? Or are they sort of being used as guidance, up or down, you know?
In a sense, they're being revisited. So the county intended to incorporate those specific plans into this planning effort. So, and if I'm not mistaken, there will no longer be 4 separate plans that are out there. It will be the one comprehensive plan that will also address the various communities.
There'll be sub-plans or chapters within that larger document.
Exactly. So again, we are not completely rewriting them, but we are looking at information to be that would need to be updated and made the most relevant. And of course, because they are all separate documents, we're trying to streamline the type and character of information that falls within them. So they'll have the same type of flow, the same layout, things like that, but of course be focused on the relevant communities. So I think, some of those plans are 100+ pages. So we haven't gotten quite as far into the process to know what might be taken out or put in or reorganized or whatnot, but that's certainly something that between the different visioning sessions, as well as working with this commission and the technical committee and staff, we will make those decisions about how they will best flow and relate to the overall document itself.
And sorry, I keep adding a question. What about the municipal plans, right? They are somewhat parallel, but they're distinct and separate documents with respect to their own jurisdictional oversight. How do they interact moving forward? Are they going to be consulted? Are they going to be just sort of say, you're still on your own, but I mean, how does that, right? You talked about community plans, which are under county jurisdiction, but these standalone municipal entities, how are they handled procedurally?
So we will be doing very brief overviews of the different jurisdictions, sort of a snapshot of what they look like today, but we will also include some information from them about, say, their vision or where they want to see moving forward. We're not imposing that as, this is their comprehensive plan now. That is their responsibility to complete and update those and implement the recommendations that come out of those plans. But we do want to certainly acknowledge them in the county's overall plan, and we don't intend to do that in a vacuum. We will be through the Council of Governments and those local representatives. We will be engaging them to make sure that what everyone's doing is not in conflict. We certainly wouldn't want to put forth a plan for the county that then the municipal plans say something completely different, because that is not a good situation for anyone.
Good luck with that.
We'll try our best. So that's really how we see moving forward. You know, especially as consultants, we are not doing this in a vacuum. So we really do need that local input to really help guide us to where the county wants us to go and where it needs to go.
Thank you. And lastly, thank you for all your presentation. And just a point of reference, it's interesting that in case you're unaware, if not, I'll make you aware, that's a picture of Talbot County on your closing slide.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I was going to ask the same question.
No
to make
disrespect
sure.
intended.
What was that?
That's a picture of St. Michael's.
I know, yeah.
Yeah.
It's Talbot County.
That will be duly noted by anyone. County. And it happens a lot.
I didn't know whether I should say anything or not, but.
Yeah.
My sincere apologies for that. I believe then that
Quite
was
all right.
certainly mislabeled, and we will do a better job moving forward.
Sat there long enough.
If three of us in this room figured it out, a lot more people will figure it out, so.
Yeah, you don't want to get 25 of those questions per public hearing, or public meeting.
Thank you. Thank
'cause
you very
will.
much.
125 probably. Thank you.
Good job.
Any other questions for?
No.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Look forward to working with you. Next up on our agenda is miscellaneous staff items.
One of the major goals that you're gonna have is to make that thing about half the size of what you have in your arm right now. It's way too long.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Wisnowski?
members of the Planning Commission, I think most of you have heard that I am resigning my position as Director of Planning and Zoning effective September the 4th. Simply put, I'm retiring. I started my career as a planner way back in March of 1980, and I've been doing this for well over 40 years. A lot of thought has gone into this, and it's a personal decision. It's not, I really love Queen Anne's County. I've always appreciated the support of the Planning Commission and your support of my staff. It's just time after 40 years to take it easy and do something else. I joke with Joe Stevens. I tell him that I'm done arguing with you, Joe. I don't want to argue with you anymore. I say that in jest, but it's always the goal of our staff to absolutely try to provide the best product for the county. And when you put yourself in that situation, there are disagreements. And even thinking back further, I make it as a joke, but truly, after 40 years, I don't want to say lost my passion, but I really want to step back and take it easy for a little while. So I want to thank each and every one of you. I know the new members don't know me very well. I've been here a little over 5.5 years. I just really feel that.
It's gone quick.
Yeah, May 26th, 2015. I'm looking forward to seeing that the county perhaps gets someone a bit younger, a bit more energy. You know, when I first started 5 years ago, I had a vision, and I was successful in some things, and some things I was not. And that's part of life. So I'm not going to forget about Queen Anne's County. I will be following you. And again, I really appreciate the support that this board has given my staff through those 5 years. It really has meant a lot to me personally, and thank you.
Wow, Michael, 5.5 years, it's hard to believe that it's been that long. You know, I think you've done an outstanding job for the county, speaking, you know, personally, and I appreciate all the efforts that you've provided, the accountability that you've held us to. I think you've helped raise the board a little bit, or the commission, to make sure that we do our diligence, not only for your staff. You've had quite a bit of staff changeover in 5 years, actually. And that goes to show your leadership and resilience to keep staff in tune and up to date to keep us informed. So thank you very much for all your efforts.
Ellis, good luck.
Thank you.
Well, with no additional miscellaneous staff items. Oh,
Would you like updates on all of the text amendments, or would you like to get those
Yes.
updates next time?
you can do them now.
This is anticlimactic after Mike's announcement, so.
We should have had them in the beginning. It's all right.
Okay, so the impact fees, which is Amendment 20-03, that case was the subject of a public hearing in June 23rd. There was to have been a vote on the 14th, but that vote was tabled and an amendment was requested, and this board also discussed that potential amendment, and that was to tabulate that 3% processing fee after the initial payment of the assessed impact fee, so that at time of application, the impact fee is assessed, but 50% payment is required. That 3% is based on the remainder of the unpaid bill. So that amendment was written, and that will be presented and introduced by the commissioners at their meeting on the 25th of August. The Amendment 20-04, which is the Resource Conservation Area Accessory Dwelling Units provision, that was approved by the Critical Area Commission after having been forwarded by the county commissioners. That approval was on the 5th of August, and that application will be returned to the county commissioners with a request for a public hearing on it, and that will go before the commissioners on the 25th. The lot width amendment, which was 20-05, has finally been approved, so that's one of them in the books, and that was approved on the 14th of July and is effective 46 days from that date. And the next item that is going to go before the commissioners for an amendment is an update to the International Building Code. And so that will be presented to the county commissioners on the 25th as well. That's a standard update. It's required every 2 years based on most of the code updates. But what Vivian has worked on this time is getting an automatic update written into our code so that it doesn't have to be the subject of a resolution each and every time the International Building Code comes under a new edition.
So would they be proposing to adopt the 2018 codes?
Some of them are, there's a 2019, there's a 2017. They all fall, as you know, on different dates in the fire code, the energy code, the residential, and then the commercial codes. They never fall exactly on the same dates. So what we're going to do is remove the dates and adopt language that automatically updates to the most current edition.
How often will you do that? Will it be an annual update?
We won't have to do it anymore unless we, as a local jurisdiction, want to enact more restrictive provisions. We only have one exception to the code in the county, and which is typical, and that is an exception to agricultural building construction plan requirements. Otherwise, we adopt as written. So the only time now there should be action taken on these codes is if there should be an incident where we want to alter the minimum standards. So, that's everything.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lastly, Bruce, are there any public comments?
We do not have any more public comments. However, we do owe an apology to Jay Falstad. Apparently, he had a hard time getting our link to work to join our meeting. So he did want to comment on the Goldsboro Materials concept plan, saying that the QACA has some objections to this proposal. So I'm sorry he didn't get to speak. I'm not sure what happened.
Well, I'm sorry Mr. Falstead was unable to log in and make his comments. The proposal that was presented before the Planning Commission was for concept plan only and a recommendation to the Board of Appeals. So, Mr. Falstead, if you're out there and you're watching, you can go to the Board of Appeals and make your comments heard there. And depending upon whatever the Board of Appeals does, if and when Goldsboro Materials Materials brings the site plan back to the Planning Commission, we would, welcome all your comments as we do any public comment.
That's it.
Standing. So, is there anything else for the good of the commission?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I would like to bring up a bit of old business that's, in my mind at least, remained unfinished, and that harkens back to the contract dissolution with the previous comprehensive plan update. At our meeting, I believe it was in March or April, we didn't have one in April. You asked us to reserve judgment on that situation before we had time to review that Public Information Act package request, which has since been distributed to the group. And I'd just like to follow up with you, give you the professional opportunity or courtesy to answer to that package and some of the accusations and the other things in that. Specifically, I have questions about an email from Mr. Mon. I see Commissioner Moran's in the back of the room. Anything you'd like to say to those accusations, that situation, that scenario?
So the email that I received from Mr. Mon, I responded to, that was part of the PIA, the Public Information Act package. In February, March, April meeting, I requested that every single member of the commission at that time receive a copy of that package. Because I believe that the information that was provided was incomplete and erroneous. It was my understanding, based off the information that I provided back to the Queen Anne County Commissioners in my letter that was part of the PIA, the county commissioners have not, I offered to meet with them and have a discussion, and they have not taken that action. Mr. Mon has not moved forward with that. If we would like to, I don't know what else there is to respond to.
Well, if I'm recalling the previous contractor's letter of dissolution to the county, she made comment, literally, I think I'm quoting here, but I'm coming close, is that you made a comment in a meeting in the back of the office here that you work at the pleasure of the county commissioners. And Mr. Mon's email dated March 12 says, Jeff, based on the situation outlined in the attached email from Virginia Smith, the commissioners have asked that you please tender your resignation from the Planning Commission. Please feel free to call me with questions. Was that what was the follow-up? Why, where's the end of this conversation? What was the next steps taken after that email was sent?
So, the context in which was presented to Commissioner Moran was similar to the position I hold and where I work, that I serve at the pleasure of the mayor or the director. So I said that jestfully, as I'm an appointed official. Whether it was taken literally by Ms. Smith or not, I don't know. I can't speak to her actions. However, when Mr. Mon received whatever notifications from Miss Jenny Smith, he didn't have an entire story, in my opinion. He only had whatever she presented. I presented the other half of the story in documentation that was part of the PIA, and the county commissioners, now, I don't know if there has not been any other resolution to that, other than it was my understanding that the county commission had accepted that letter and determined that maybe there was no need to have a meeting or resignation. So, if you would like, we can call for, a vote of confidence. I believe I would like to wait until Mr. Jackson got back. I believe he has an opportunity. Unfortunately, we lost Ms. Tolliver, who hasn't had any additional comments. Her concerns were that when Ms. Albrecht had concerns, that we weren't going to allow her to voice her opinion and have her questions answered. We've done that. Ms. Tolliver hasn't had any objections or additional conversation with me about the situation. So, you know, I don't.
There's an awful lot of weight in a one-sentence email, too, if you consider the please feel free to call me with questions, and it just seems like an awfully large thing to go unanswered to me. And I'd like to invite Commissioner Moran, please, if you can address this sort of outstanding issue as I see it or read it.
Well, I will interject what I know from the commissioner's standpoint. Jim Moran, Queen Anne's County Commissioner. Good afternoon, everybody. A couple things, and have to go back and rake through the memory. The County Administrator Mon sent that letter, and if you talk to some of the other commissioners, they will say that they never asked for a resignation. They asked for him to step down from his position as the chair. Be that as it may, after further review in our meetings, one of the things that was brought out was everything we had in front of us was from the consultants, was from this office being the Planning Commission, and nothing was from Mr. Reese. So we never actually gave him the opportunity to tell his side of the story. And I'm going to take the heat on that because that was my fault. I should, as the president of the commission, I should have said, look, we're not going to pass anything, any judgment, any votes until we hear from Mr. Reese, and we never did, until he responded with his letter. After he responded to his letter, which is, I think, part of the PIA now, after he responded with his letter of the incident and what took place, and I am now speaking on behalf of all the county commissioners, we said, you know, with that information in hand, we as the commissioners do not have a problem with Mr. Reese staying as the chair. And that's a majority of the commissioners, not exactly everyone, but the majority of the commissioners. And that also, if this board has a vote of confidence in his position, we support that also and rescind anything else that could have come before that. And that would be to Mr. Mon's letter. So I hope that clears up the air of where this all sits. And I know there's chatter out there that we have asked him to resign, and that was in error. And that, again, if this board is willing to make a motion and a vote of confidence, the county commissioners will abide by that and move forward from this position.
So without throwing Mr. Mon under the bus, potentially premature, that his email, or maybe the word choice, and I appreciate your explanation. So as far as your commission, county commissioner's position, you're leaving it up to this body as to how we move forward. You're comfortable with Mr. Reese remaining on the commission. However, you're leaving it up to us as to whether or not we have confidence or faith in his ability to respectfully and appropriately sit in the chairman.
That is correct.
Correct.
That is correct.
Appreciate
Okay.
that.
Yes. Thank you.
One last thing, and not for you, Commissioner, thank you, appreciate it. It's just, this process, right, it's very important, and we started it out, and we had a very strict deadline of the end of the year, and we had plans in place. We had already even started holding community outreach and education, to the Smith and Associates. And we're looking at this last, one of the slides that was just presented by Montgomery Wallace. We've almost doubled that calendar extension, not to mention the financial extension that this unfortunate situation caused the county and the taxpayers of the county. And even more so to me is that there's just this awkwardness now about this process moving forward, and how we as a board, as a government entity or an extension thereof, we need to be transparent, we need to be open and honest. Democracy dies in the darkness. I am a firm believer of innocent until proven guilty, and every story, every argument has two sides. And I've thought about this for months, and there was COVID delays, and there was no meetings, and I I get that. I don't want this to come as a, I just pulled the pin on a grenade and set it on the table. That's not my intention. I want to, however, there's been an awful lot going on outside of this room with conversations on social media, email storms, and they all bring up, valid points. And I wanted to give you the opportunity to address that. And I wanted, and thank you again, Commissioner, for attending the meeting, regular meetings, right? It's nice to have a liaison in the room. Whether you speak or not, it's appreciated. And I think that this issue, because of its gravity and the potential for overshadowing the current process that we just started today, I wanted to sort of clear the air and get this out in the open. And I appreciate your explanation of your follow-up to Mr. Mon's letter and allowing us the time to digest that package. And I will, I guess, defer to the rest of the group as to how we want to proceed from here. Right, you're still the chairman, and if you'd like to hold a vote, if we'd like to wait for Mr. Jackson to come in, I don't know how much the two new commissioners are aware of this conversation and this happening, because it was now back in January, February when Smith came before us. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I would make a suggestion that we either hold the vote till next month when Tom's here, or end it right now. I mean,
I'm happy to
I
defer
thought it was ended last month, but I guess obviously it wasn't.
There was not even a mention of this last month. We weren't here.
Yep.
Not last month, the month before, the last meeting, I'm sorry.
No, there was no follow-up on the package once it was disseminated to the commissioners, planning commissioners.
Final word.
Just point of fairness. I think, in fairness, our two new members have no idea what you're talking about.
Correct.
And so, in fairness, they should have an opportunity to review the information. The packet went out to all these folks, but you haven't seen it, and you haven't seen it. So I think it's unfair to hold a vote today on anything until these two new members at least get an opportunity to read what is.
I don't disagree at all.
So it'll get tabled till next month.
Okay, we'll table it till next month. That's fine.
And do we have to make a recommendation? Mr. Wisnowski, would you make sure that the package, or Amy or whomever is in charge of that PIA document, disseminate that to the...
I'm going to have, what I'll do is the original package, it was sent by Todd Mon to all of us. I'll make sure that it gets out to both Mr. Ebersberger and Ms. Diotis.
Great. And if you responded to Mr. Mon's email dated 12 March, I'd like to see that response as well, because that was not part of this package.
I don't know which package you received, but it was part of the PIA I received.
Okay,
So-
well, if you're going to resend it,
Yeah,
it should be included in that.
Why don't you resend it to the whole,
I'll
That's
resend it
easy.
to everybody.
Great.
We'll put it all in one.
Thank
and
you.
then we can resolve it once and for all.
Greatly appreciate it.
Okay. Any other business? Go to the commission. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
By adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.